J.D. Vance went head-to-head in what turned out to be a fairly civil, by today's standards, televised debate. For the first portion of today's show, we'll talk about takeaways, highlights, and in retrospect, will it have any effect on November's outcome? You can call or text at 877-301-8970.
I'm Andrea Cabral in for Marjorie Egan. Then it's an arts and culture roundup with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He'll tell us about a powerful traveling memorial to victims of gun violence on view now at the ICA, and how Indigenous artist Jeffrey Gibson is taking over the public mural wall in Dewey Square. It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The UN Security Council has opened a meeting about the degenerating situation in the Middle East. Israel has vowed to retaliate after Iran fired scores of ballistic missiles into its territory yesterday. One person was killed in the West Bank. Iran says any retaliatory action by Israel will provoke a, quote, crushing response. Israel has also banned UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres from entering the country. Israeli officials claim he has not done enough to condemn Iran's attack. Guterres says he is condemning Iran's action now, just as he did when Iran attacked Israel earlier this year.
As I did in relation to the Iranian attack in April, and as should have been obvious yesterday in the context of the condemnation I expressed, I again strongly condemn yesterday's massive missile attack by Iran on Israel. And these attacks, paradoxically, do nothing to support the cause of the Palestinian people or reduce their suffering.
He says Israel continues to conduct deadly and destructive attacks in Gaza. Former President Donald Trump spoke yesterday about the Mideast situation as he campaigned in Wisconsin. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports.
In response to a question about conflict in the Middle East, Trump said that he thinks the current global situation could become another world war. He added that another Trump presidency would promote peace in the Middle East, and at one point seemed to suggest that more fighting could resolve the conflict.
This has really been bad, but they have to finish that process. However it turns out, they have to finish the process. This is a little bit like two kids fighting in the schoolyard. Sometimes you have to just sort of let it go a little bit.
Trump has several more rallies this week, including one in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he survived an assassination attempt in July. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
President Biden will soon depart the White House to visit the Carolinas. He's going to survey storm recovery efforts. At least 160 people have died from Hurricane Helene. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports on storm recovery efforts in Tennessee.
Helene ripped up roads and bridges across mountainous terrain, and it's been tough for first responders just to get to places. But federal agencies say they are signing up people for assistance, and that number will go up fast. Meanwhile, others are pitching in. Matthew Jackson shut down his pizzeria in Knoxville, Tennessee, to give out food an hour away.
400 hot dogs, 350 chicken sandwiches, 500 burgers, and we're all out of food.
There's still no timeline for water service to be restored. One regional hospital warns that's unsafe for newborns. It's urging new parents and later-term pregnant women to evacuate the area. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Newport, Tennessee.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Enrollment is now open for Massachusetts Home Energy Assistance Program. As of yesterday, October 1st, eligible Massachusetts households can now apply for financial assistance for the 2024-2025 heating season. Program known as HEAP, H-E-A-P, provides money to eligible households to help them pay their winter heating bills. It is a free, statewide resource that helps eligible renters and homeowners by paying a portion of their winter heating bills directly to their heating companies. The program runs from November 1st, 2024 through April 30th of next year, offers grants that do not need to be paid or repaid. However, households must meet specific eligibility requirements to qualify. In Greater Boston, celebrating a significant transportation milestone today, and it's not the MBTA. It's 25 million rides taken on blue bikes. According to Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is the title sponsor of the bike since its launch, Blue Bikes has become an essential part of Metro Boston's public transit network. More than 4,500 bikes and 500 stations across 13 municipalities. To celebrate the milestone and to thank the community, Blue Cross is offering free $25 Blue Bikes credits today only with the Blue Cross 25 code in the Blue Bikes app. And that is only while supplies last. In sports, Revolution in Houston tonight. Sun, clouds, mid-60s today. We are at 62 right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Sony Pictures Classics, presenting The Outrun, a new film starring Saoirse Ronan. A young woman returns home to the magical Orkney Islands while on a journey of recovery and sobriety. Starts Friday, only in theaters.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Marjorie Egan. Hello there, Andrea. How are you?
Hello there, Jim. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Marjorie is reportedly back tomorrow. She did text me about 75 times last night during the debate. We are live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us here for an hour of Ask the Mayor on Tuesday from noon to 1. So last night, Republican vice presidential hopeful J.D. Vance played a moderate on TV, finding so much common ground with Tim Walz that he almost made the Trump agenda look normal. The vice presidential debate had markedly less vitriol and a lot of substance than we're used to in recent political history. I thought Vance, media savvy senator from Ohio, was much more polished than Walz. Walz, a former teacher, coach, and the proud governor of Minnesota, looked nervous for most of the night to me. But he also did something the moderators did not. He pressed Vance on his demonization of migrants and the Republican ticket's attempts to scapegoat them for all of the nation's problems. And then, in the very last moments of the debate, there was this.
He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It was a damning non-answer. The lines are open. We want to get your thoughts if you watched the whole thing last night or the clips on social media this morning. The number to call or text is 877-301-8970. Did you watch? What did you think? And most importantly, will it change anything for you or other voters about the choice in November? The number is 877-301-8970. So, Andrea Cabral, what'd you think?
Well, I've had some time to reflect. I tend to be, this won't surprise anybody who's listening, but I tend to be an aggressive debater, not necessarily in tone, but in terms of being sort of laser focused on the points that really sort of need to be made. So it was sort of a slow burn, a slow start to it, and which frustrated me. It got progressively better. I absolutely believe that Walz was nervous. I stopped actually and thought to myself, what this guy is looking at in terms of pressure is really significant, given that he's a governor of a state. He probably did local debates, running for Senate. It was a lot on his shoulders, but I think he definitely warmed up. And I think it had to do, ultimately I decided, with what were the people who prepped him telling him to do? Because when you see Tim Walz out on the campaign trail, he's much more acerbic and pointed in his criticism. And it kind of got me thinking that the people who prepped him said, we're trying to reach the people who are perhaps Republicans that want like a permission structure to vote for us, or people who somehow are still not undecided in this election and they're tired of the vitriol. So really try to be sort of down the middle. That was what my ultimate takeaway was. That said, by the halfway point of the debate, I think no matter what they told him, he had it, and he started confronting Vance much more regularly. Would I have preferred that he do it right out of the box? Sure. But I think that the hits that he got in were very, very significant. I would have much preferred that he was able to simply call Vance a liar and move on to talking about the accomplishments of Harris and the Harris-Biden administration. He didn't do that. He never once called him a liar, and he's a liar.
Well, we agree on some things. I think Walz did get better. I thought his abortion thing, we'll play that, was very powerful. And this Vance thing, we have to regain the trust, was very clever, but not very convincing. I thought the final thing was good, even though, frankly, while everybody's praising Walz, I would have asked him the question repeatedly. You didn't answer my question, Senator. Did Donald Trump win the election? But he did it once, which is good. I thought Walz was so nervous, it was unbelievable. As someone who's done debates, as of you, whenever you look down and are writing furiously, it's because you're not sure exactly what to do and who to look at. Vance was prepared. He was very smooth. If you had never seen Vance before, you wouldn't think he was the lunatic fringe person that he is. I think he did a pretty good job. And if you have seen Walz before, I think you'd mostly say, where is that guy? The thing that I loved about Walz, who I knew almost nothing about after he was picked, he smiles incessantly, even when he's jabbing you. I didn't see much of a smile last night because he was
anxious. That's why I think it's the prep.
And I agree. I think he was over-prepared. And I'm stealing a line from Dana Bash, who said this last night on CNN. He was so over-prepared that I think he was unable to listen to exactly what he said. What I would have done, and again, let's be clear here so you don't send angry emails. This is the highest stakes thing these guys have ever been in their whole lives. So it's easy to, whatever that's called. Monday morning quarterback. I was ready to hear, boy, this is rich, from a guy who is endangering every Haitian American in this country because of continued lies. Yeah. For a guy who thinks that women who don't have children are miserable. I would have said it every damn time. And Walz appears to be such a nice guy that when Vance was faking his moderation, the camera's on Walz nodding his head. What are you talking about? This is Donald Trump's running mate. Talk about, who cares what Vance says? Vance just said this. Here's what Donald Trump has said, and he would be the president. So I have to say, I was disappointed in Walz's performance. However, and we're going to get to your calls in a second, the answer to the question, at least for me, about whether the debate matters is an emphatic no. I read you some polling numbers from Politico this morning. This is after the debate. 72% of Democrats thought Walz won. What percentage of Republicans thought Vance won? 71%, the exact same thing. After the debate, Democrats, who'd be the best vice president? 92%. Walz, who'd be the best vice president for Republicans? 91% Vance. The point being that people are so locked in to their partisanship that I'm not sure that a subpar performance by Walz and a better than I could have ever expected from Vance is going to make much of a difference.
But also look at it this way. This is the one point I want to make before we go to the calls and the text. If you're Vance, just like if you're Trump, it doesn't matter what the question is. Democrats invariably suffer from their natural inclination to serve and to respond to the question. And when they're confronted with something that's probably it's going to lead to an uncomfortable answer, to try to sort of figure it out. For the Trumps and the Vances of the world, you just get out there and you lie. And when you get called on lying, you double down on the lie so that it bounces off of you like Teflon. If you are soulless, if you have no moral core, and that is exactly why Vance is in the position that he's in now. Not because Trump wants him there, but because Peter Thiel and others want him there. For when if Trump wins, they can push him out. Who bought him his Senate seat. They made up their minds. Steve Bannon basically told people this a while ago before he went to jail. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you do. We have a plan. We're following that plan, and we're going to do it. And there's nothing about conscience or what is right for people is going to stop us. They have a shark-like ability to stay focused. Meanwhile, Democrats are juggling the optics, having to do their own fact-checking, having to get all the facts out. It's almost a no-win situation.
Well, I thought you were going to say, and this is my last thing before we get to your calls, because I know everybody wants to talk about it in your text, is that Democrats often are too focused on substance. The other thing that I'm serious. Well, but the reality, I know people don't like to hear this. When you watch a debate where you don't know who the players are, you may disagree with this. You leave with impressions of the candidates rather than most people. Most people are not going home and saying, let's dissect the answer on abortion or on whatever. True. How do you feel about these two people? And in light of the fact that most Americans really probably had never seen Vance for more than 2 seconds or Walz for more than 2 seconds, that's important. But here's the other thing that upset me. Everybody in America who was paying attention knew that one of the questions to Walz was going to be about the New York Times story yesterday, suggesting that when he said repeatedly that he was in Hong Kong when the riots in Tiananmen Square happened in 1989, he actually was not. He was totally unprepared to answer the question. Here's how he attempted to do his response to the question about his saying he was in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square and was not. Here he is.
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Whatever that means. Josiah in Provincetown, you are first post-vice presidential debate on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hey, yeah, I just thought I'd be willing to trade a softer performance from Walz. You know, I have notes just like you do, just for the spectacle of a reasonable debate. You know, if these things don't really move the needle when they're, you know, the running mate, then I just like the idea that everyone had to watch a debate that somewhat resembled the stuff we've been used to for the last, you know, decades, you know, prior to this new era. So to me, I was willing to take the compromise there.
Josiah, is this my friend Josiah?
Yeah, indeed. Yep.
Hey, Josiah, how are you? Good buddy.
Hey,
And
good.
not only a wonderful soul, I know you hate when I mention this all the time, the captain of the boat with the guy who ended up in the mouth of the whale. But that's not Josiah's greatest quality. His greatest quality is his mind. Josiah, it's great to hear from you. Say hi to everybody. Thanks so much for the call. 877-301-8097.
And there's something to that. I mean, there definitely is an audience that would like to, however long gone it is in our politics, would like to hearken back to a kinder, gentler time. And the bottom line is that in terms of his just fundamental decency,
Walz.
yes,
I agree.
Walz is always able to show that because he's just a naturally empathetic person and a naturally decent person. And I think that came through, you know, regardless of the nervousness. I still think at the end of the day, if you ask voters, who did you like more? The answer has got to be Walz, because there was nothing except this sort of slick condescension. I mean, Vance was condescending to the moderators. He was condescending to Walz. He acted as though Harris was president and had the power to do all these things. So, I mean, I think, but I think that there are a fair number of people, not, you know, very few, probably far fewer people like me that want to kind of see them go at it hammer and tongs.
I hope you're right, but again, in light of the fact that the vast majority of viewers, I'm assuming, never saw more than a couple of seconds of J.D. Vance, I thought he came, if you didn't know anything,
right.
I thought
that's the downside.
When he turned to Walz after Walz said, my 17-year-old son was there when there was a shooting, and he turned to Walz and says, I'm really sorry that your son had to live through that. And Walz accepted and said, thank you, like a decent person would do. If you don't know J.D. Vance and his history, you say, well, there's sort of a mensch. I can't believe I'm even saying this. Ellen in the car.
Versus saying, you don't really care about that because you think that schools should become hardened fortresses versus giving up, you know, assault weapons. Right.
Ellen in the car.
Hi, Ellen.
Next on Boston Public Radio. What's on?
Hi,
What's going on? Hi.
I say all the time, I kind of put the onus on the American people. Like, we shouldn't be impressed by a slick performance. And it does come off as though he's like normal and moderate. And he presents himself well and he speaks well. And he says all the right things, but he's also been schooled. I mean, everything I know about him is he morphs into whatever situation will benefit him. And he does it quite well. And without fact-checking, even though it was a politer debate than what we've seen in the last couple of years, it almost presented him in a way that is not genuine because he can just lie. And then the only time that he was like actually trapped in the lie, he was very defensive, very combative, and immediately said, I thought you weren't going to fact check us. Right. Like, I thought I didn't have to come up here and tell the truth.
That's a good one, Ellen.
That's exactly right.
My performance. And it's just like, who's more genuine? I mean, if we're looking for slick, we're going to get slick and we're going to get con.
That is so true, Ellen.
Make your choices that way.
Thank you for the call. And no, he was sort of like, well, wait a minute. I agreed to a debate where I could lie and not be challenged by any of you. Had I known you were going to challenge me, I wouldn't have shown up. Yeah, she's right about that, though. I mean,
but again, Ellen, who's a good caller, knew a lot going into the debate.
Right.
I operate on the assumption if you know a lot, nothing that happens last night is going to change anything. It's for the lower engaged voter that last night could have mattered. And again, here is another incredible moment. And I can't even believe he could say these words. Here is Vance essentially claiming that Trump salvaged Obamacare. Here's what Vance had to say, and then we'll tell you what, if you didn't hear it or don't recall, what Walz's response was. Here's Vance.
Something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership.
By the way, the very program is the Affordable Care Act, and they attempted to repeal it, the Republicans, Trump, dozens of times. And as Walz eventually said in his response, were it not for John McCain's thumbs down. But again, maybe I'm too focused on style, and feel free to criticize me if you feel that way, Andrea. My response would have been, are you kidding?
Right.
Are you kidding? Let's look at the facts.
I don't disagree.
How many dozens of times did he attempt to do it, and were it not for the principled person who was a prisoner of war, who your boss, Donald Trump, thinks wasn't good enough, because I like soldiers who are not captured. Had it not been for John McCain's courage, people wouldn't have this, and pre-existing conditions weren't covered.
And you've yet to come up with a plan to replace it. No. I'm not disagreeing with you that there were lots of sort of missed opportunities to go at him. The point I was making at the opening of the segment was, I think that his prep people told him to kind of pull back. And I think that may have been a mistake. Possible. Because he's not like that when he's out on the stump.
John in Westford, welcome to the show. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, good morning.
Hey.
To me, the debate seemed like JFK versus Richard Nixon. And Walz actually, when he turns sideways, he does look like Richard Nixon. It's kind of spooky. And look at it again. You have to go back and look at it with that in mind.
John, it's not going to infuriate Andrea that you said this. It's going to infuriate Andrea when I say this. I thought the exact same thing last night. I thought Vance knew exactly what the audience was, how to look at the camera, how to look at your opponent, and that Walz had not been prepared for what you do when you have a two-shot, as it's called, when you're being looked at by the viewer at the same time that Vance is speaking. So it pains me to say that you and I are one on this issue, John, but I think your observation was a good one. John, thanks for the call. 877-301-8970.
So among our texters, I think these are anonymous texts. I don't see any names attached to any of them. But one texter thought that it was good that the moderator said that migrants in Springfield are mostly here legally. And that, I guess, was what prompted Vance's, you said no fact-checking.
Yeah.
The texter said it's weird that he was disturbed about the truth being spoken. But the other part of that, in case people have forgotten, is that the moderators were moving on and told him they were moving on. His time was up. He talked over the moderators, mansplained the law to them, only to have, it wasn't Nora Roberts, it was the other moderator.
Nora O'Connell.
O'Donnell say. Yeah. Was it Nora O'Donnell or was it the other moderator?
I'm not sure it was.
Said, thank you for explaining the law. And I'm telling you, every woman felt every bit of that when she said that.
I agree.
Okay, so, well, thank you very much for all of your calls and texts.
No, we're not done.
What? No, we're going to take a break.
Oh, we are taking a break, yeah. I thought you were bidding them farewell on the topic there.
No, we're going to take more of your calls and texts next.
Correct.
She's mansplaining the show to me.
Okay,
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Teachers and students in Argentina are going on strike to protest budget cuts to state-run universities.
La universidad, como te digo, es un estorbo para él y trata de sacársela de encima.
The university system is a hindrance for President Milei, and he wants to get rid of it, says this student. What's at stake for higher ed in Argentina? Next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, helping foster healthy relationships with money by providing education and resources to the community. one neighborhood at a time. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, sitting in for Marjorie, who's back tomorrow. We're live at the library, stream at youtube.com/GBH News. And as I said, Mayor Wu will join us on Tuesday here from 12 to 1. Our text prompt of the day, I can't believe this is our topic. It's Fat Bear Week in Alaska. The annual contest was sullied after one of the bears mauled and killed one of the competitors on the live stream. We want to know, Fat Bear Week has been our low-stakes refuge from politics for years. And now this. You're still into it, and should Bear 469 be disqualified for trying to rig the voting? Text us at 877-301-8970. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about last night's vice presidential debate, which may be the last debate this cycle. You can weigh in at 877-301-8970.
So can I just say, I think the part that sort of bothers me the most, because I agree with you that the debate's not going to move the needle, and it is what it is that I actually see Vance as more dangerous than Trump.
Because he's much smarter.
They are both accomplished liars, but Vance is smart enough to not go down particular rabbit holes. His lies have purpose.
Totally agree.
He's younger. He's 40 years old. And I thought Chris Hayes made this point last night. He's been in the Senate for less than 2 years. He has no other government experience. The Senate seat that he won, he won by a fraction of the amount that in a red state people in other offices won by. And he's an acolyte of the Peter Thiels of the world, or the billionaire who bought a seat. The idea that he could be a breath away from the presidency that's one of the regrets I have, is that Walz didn't sort of take him to task, son, kind of thing. Walz has been in government service for over 40 years and has been in military service. J.D. Vance has never served. All of that stuff.
No, he was.
I think.
Vance
he was.
I'm
sorry, he was
never in government.
Yeah, combat correspondent. You're absolutely right. The Marines. But he didn't take him to task on the fact that he is less. He has, I think it's a third of the experience that Dan Quayle had when he ran, and we put Dan Quayle through the ringer for being completely unprepared to be vice president.
Well, you might say Barack Obama only served 2 years in the United States Senate, too. He was a state senator, but based on my experience in Massachusetts, being a state senator is not exactly preparation for being the leader of the free world. In any case, Brian, you're in the home state of, home state of Andrew Cabral. That'd be Rhode Island. Hey,
Hi,
Brian, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
I have 2 points I wanted to make.
Please.
One, the first was that last night Joy Reid made an interesting point about how decided voters really wanted last night to be a smackdown, and were kind of disappointed that it wasn't. Whereas undecided voters really wanted like a substantive debate, and that's kind of what they got. And given the fact that there were no personal attacks from either candidate last night, and there's also like a lot of like common ground, like both Walz and Vance kept being like, I agree with my opponent. Like that leads me to believe last night was actually kind of a strategy. They were both kind of getting the same assignment. So I thought that was interesting.
Brian, can I just comment on that? But by Walz playing that game and saying how much I enjoyed this debate at the end and nodding in agreement and saying we have a lot of common ground, he's normalizing the lying, essentially, of the Trump-Vance ticket. So, again, if they were two good faith, decent souls who just had policy disagreements, I'd agree with you. But I thought Walz let him play a role that is not who he is. But what's your second point?
Well, and I completely agree with that, and I'll lead that into my second point, was that the performance that J.D. Vance gave last night, while very good, was one night only. Like, that's not who he normally is, and he's back on the campaign trail today. Like, which version of J.D. Vance does he go forward with?
Good question.
Either if he sticks with who he was last night, he alienates anyone in the base, and if he, goes back to who we know him to be, then he risks alienating anyone he won over last night. Whereas Tim Walz, for better or worse, who he was last night is going to be who he is today and who he was 2 weeks ago and who he's always been. So Tim Walz is at least consistent for better or worse.
Brian, thanks for your analysis. We really appreciate it.
We do have some texters that are saying that, Vance wasn't nearly as slavishly devoted to Donald Trump as in terms of tone and content as we all know Donald Trump would expect him to be. So it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is. But Trump says he doesn't talk to Vance anyway, so I guess maybe it doesn't matter.
That's a very good point, by the way. We've heard a million times, including most notably when Kavanaugh was giving his pathetic testimony, his crying testimony, Justice Kavanaugh eventually, associate judge in front of Congress, the line that is totally true when you have a connection to Trump, you're performing for an audience of one. You're not performing for the people watching. You're not performing for the potential voters. It's a very good point. You're performing for the guy who generally tolerates no. What has Trump said about? Obviously, he said it was the greatest thing ever.
I don't know what he has said about the debate, but I actually think that like I said, Vance knows the assignment. He knows that to get Trump to win through an electoral college win, the goal is then going to be to push Trump out on 25th Amendment or something else and install the young Project 2025 stalwart in the job. So I think he understood the assignment.
Let's go to Nick in Long Island. You're on Boston Public Radio. Long Island as in New York. Hello there.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. I think the media strategy of Harris and Waltz is terrible. They should be doing 2 to 3 nationally televised interviews per week.
I agree with that.
Why can't Harris or Waltz sit down for an hour with Chuck Todd or John King? It's just inexcusable to me that they've been in hiding.
Well, you're coming at it from the point of view of sort of a right to know thing. I come at it from, I agree with that. I come at it with a preparation thing. I think one of the reasons Vance was good last night is he's done 1 million interviews. And I've seen him brutalized in interviews. Dana Bash did a great job with him. That same week he did Sunday interviews. Is Walz done a national interview? I don't know if he's done.
Yeah, she did.
Walz. Has he done one?
Oh, I don't know if he's done national. He's done a ton of interviews. Everybody has. I don't know where they've been because I haven't seen them.
Yeah.
But other anchors last night were talking about the fact that he not only has done a lot of interviews, he insists on having a press cadre travel with him, and he does a Q&A with them every single day.
Yeah, but it's not, I hear you, and that's of importance electorally, but it doesn't have the same stakes as when you're on national television with somebody who's tough. And I think he would have been prepared last night. So for different reasons, Nick, I think I tend to agree with you. Thanks for the call. 877-301-8970 is the number.
So one of our texters from New Hampshire said, and I'm going to go up and look for it to get the name, said that he thought Lawrence O'Donnell had the best line of the night. This is Wayne in New Hampshire, when he opined that the most important fact brought out in the debate was that Vance was the first vice president in history who didn't know who won the last presidential election.
That's a pretty good line. Well, it was a good line by Abby Phillip, too, on CNN, which I meant to mention, that Vance laundered Trumpism for middle America, and that's exactly what his goal was.
Yeah, that's a very good description.
And I thought he did it as well and much better than I thought he could. Jenna, you're in Derry, New Hampshire. You're on Boston Public Radio.
Hi, Jenna.
Hey, Jenna. Jenna.
Hi, how are you?
We're good, thanks.
Hi. So I have a really interesting contradiction that I'm seeing in that one of the selling points for Trump was that he was not a politician, right? He was an everyman's man. They liked how he talked. They liked how he, they don't mind that he can't complete a sentence. But then you have Vance, who is very polished, who is very much, if you've seen Handmaid's Tale, like Commander Vance, and yet he's appealing to the same base of the people who said that they don't want that.
So what's your bottom line? What conclusion do you draw from that dichotomy there?
Well, my personal opinion is that I think Republicans will take a turd or a polished turd.
Lovely analysis, Jenna. Thank you for your, not soft-spoken analysis.
But the point she makes does go to my point about he's not appealing to the MAGA base. He'll say enough. He's appealing to the people with money who want minority rule, want complete deregulation, want a demolition, an utter demolition of the federal government. For people to blow it up from the inside out. That's who he's appealing to. And they don't like Trump because Trump comes in a craven, crass package. He comes in a younger, polished package, and that's more palatable.
You know,
they're going to do the same thing.
Do you believe, by the way, this is the final debate we get with almost 5 weeks left?
We used to have at least two for vice presidents, sometimes 3 or 4 for presidents.
And you also see, I assume people know that 60 Minutes, which is the most watched news program in America, always interviews the two candidates for a special right before. Donald Trump agreed to an interview, and he backed out of an interview. Does that surprise you at all?
Well, no, not at all. Do we have time for Eddie, or do we have to
We
go?
actually don't.
Oh,
Eddie,
okay.
thank you.
Eddie, thanks
and
for the
everybody
call.
else, we're sorry we just can't get there. We'll try. By the way, when we at the end of the show, we're going to talk about how you're dealing with intra-family, intra-friend kind of thing. If any of you are dying to comment on the debate, we'll take those calls then, too.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, thank you all for all of your calls and texts. Up next, we've got GBH Executive Arts Editor.
More Resilient Boston, October 17th at 6 at High Street Place. Learn more at thetrustees.org/roots.
That's news to me. No, it's not news to me. We're thrilled to be doing something on the trustees' reservation. So welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Cabral sitting in for Marjorie. Marjorie is allegedly back tomorrow. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/CBH News. Mayor Wu will join us on Tuesday here at the library from 12 to 1. Reminder, our text prompt of the day, it is Fat Bear Week. You know what that is. That's the annual Alaskan contest, but it was sullied after one of the bears mauled and killed one of his competitors on the live stream. We want to know, Fat Bear Week has been this great refuge in this world of misery. Are you still into it, and should Bear 469 be disqualified for trying to rig the voting by killing the opposition? You can text us. That should go to the Supreme Court, too. 877-301-8970. Okay, now on to more consequential things. We're joined at the desk by Jared Bowen. He's Executive Arts Editor for GBH and host of The Culture Show on 89.7, which is right after us at 2. Hello, Jared Bowen.
Hello, Jim Browdy.
Hello, Jared Bowen. How are you? So, Jared, there is an enormously popular movie on Netflix called Baby Reindeer. It came out earlier this year in April. It was immediately popular. It's a very sort of it's a bizarre story, actually. Although I'll say to people, it's much more common than people think. And it has now taken on a separate life of its own in various places. One of which is the courts. Let me play you this clip from the trailer of the show from Netflix.
You say this woman's stalking you?
Yeah, like 6 months maybe.
Why'd it take you so long to report it?
I think she needs help. She comes to my work, my house. She sends me emails like all the time.
Are any threatening towards you?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's particularly threatening.
There's a reason you're keeping her around, and maybe it's what she gives you.
Got really manly hands, haven't you? Chiseled jawline. Should we run away together?
So the policeman basically says it's not threatening because the particular email that he shows him is her coming on to him sexually.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So Baby Reindeer, as you say, is a very popular Netflix show. It started by Richard Gadd, who was an individual working in a London pub. And from 2014 to 17, he was stalked, he alleges, by a woman. And he ultimately adapted this into a stage play. And the theater program said it was based on a true story. Then this gets picked up by Netflix. It gets turned into this series, and the series begins with, "This is a true story." So this distinction is really, really, really significant here, because now that this is played out, now that this has been really, really successful, Fiona Harvey, who is the woman who ultimately was accused of stalking Richard Gadd, her character's name was Martha in the series, she has stepped forward and saying, well, you made it so obvious, all these circumstances around what I did, that people were able to track me down, so now my identity is revealed. And by the way, I'm now going to sue you because you have taken liberties and you have libeled me because you say that this is a true story when it actually wasn't. And so a California judge heard this, and a California judge has determined that this suit can actually now move forward because they presented this as fact when ultimately Netflix has already said that there was some dramatization that happened here. So it's really, really fascinating that they took these liberties and really dug themselves into a hole, I think.
So why don't they say at the beginning of every film, this is based on a true story? As a consumer, it would never occur to me, oh wait, if it's only based on a true story, it's not a true story. I mean, who pays attention to that anyway? So why don't they protect themselves by doing this, and we don't have to worry about lawsuits?
I was thinking about that this morning. I was thinking this probably all comes down to marketing. They wanted people to have even more of an intense feeling about this by just removing that word based.
Yeah,
This is a true story. Can you believe how sensational this is? This gets a little more complicated, though, because the judge has also argued that because this is so popular now, because this has all been depicted, that Fiona Harvey is essentially a public figure. And if you're a public figure, it then becomes harder, say if you're like Elizabeth Warren, it would be very hard for Elizabeth Warren to sue someone for defamation because she is a public figure. So the law becomes a little bit more ambiguous, and that would apply to Fiona Harvey as well.
So when you were a prosecutor, didn't you tell me you were doing stalking cases?
Yeah, I mean, I could only watch part of this movie because it just became excruciating to me because I knew exactly what she was going to do, and I knew how it was going to escalate. And yeah, I did domestic violence cases, and I did stalking cases that involved strangers. I did Suffolk County's first. I tried Suffolk County's first stalking case.
You did?
Yeah, because the law was relatively new. No one was quite sure how to make out the elements of it, and I just thought to myself, well, somebody needs to try a case so that we can figure out when it goes up to the appellate courts whether or not it's done right. So I ended up doing it. But what I also thought about this was, what was interesting is that there wasn't an actor playing Gad. Gad played himself, and they swept the Emmys. He got an Emmy, the production got an Emmy. They got like 3 or 4 of them, I think. Saying it's a true story when you know the person who was actually stalked is playing himself it is a bigger pull for an audience. And I think that may have gone into their calculation on why they didn't say based on, because it's so, to Jim's point, it's so easy to just say that.
Yeah, and we see this all the time. And I think a reasonable person is not really going to pay a lot of attention to that, because if you figure you're watching something on Netflix or HBO or anything else, you know that license is being taken here. We know that there are dramatic arcs. So yeah, it makes no sense why they would have dropped the word. And I think, so where I'm kind of eager to follow this now is the whole issue of public figure. So how far can she take this? Because she has also sued him for $170 million for defamation here in this libel case.
Maybe she shouldn't have stalked him. Did that occur? I mean, is that part of the next
stalking pays off. Isn't that the kind of the lesson here?
It is? Oh, because of this potential?
Because it's going to move forward, yeah.
But that's what I wanted to ask you, Jared. So part of her backstory, the real person's backstory, I think, that's the question. She supposedly stalked a police officer, endangered that police officer's child, was guilty of similar kinds of, like, really escalated kind of stalking before. If that is true, and she's got a record for it, he found that out about her, at least in the movie, by looking her up. She might be a public figure because all of that has been publicized about her before, if it's true.
But she's disputing some of those elements, like the police officer and a sexual assault, and the time that she sexually assaulted him, being Richard Gadd, the subject, the protagonist of Baby Reindeer. She's saying she didn't do it. So this gets very messy.
This is going to be a terrible trial.
All right, I'm going to continue to pretend like I care about this case, but let's move on. This I do care about. Can you describe this ICA, this Gun Violence Memorial Project that sounds spectacular and important and necessary?
This is really, really important and spectacular and necessary. So the Gun Violence Memorial Project started a few years ago, and this has been traveling the country, and it just opened in Boston for the first time in 3 different locations. It's at Boston City Hall, it's at the Institute of Contemporary Art, and it's at the Mass Design Building here in Boston. This is significant because Mass Design is the architectural firm that is responsible for the National Memorial of Justice and Peace, otherwise known as the National Memorial for Justice and Peace, otherwise known as the Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. They're also responsible for the Embrace statue here in Boston, and now the Gun Violence Memorial Project. And so where they have entered into this is this moment where we're looking at what monuments and memorials mean in 2024 and in our times, and should they just be a statue that stands for all time and doesn't change? This very much changes. So it's constructed as a series of glass houses, and because a house is a very familiar structure, a house is something that can protect us and something we identify with. It has clear glass walls, and it has open bricks within. they leave space for the family members of victims of gun violence to contribute objects representing their family members to be inserted in those bricks. And so you find objects like, I just was at the ICA yesterday looking at this, you find trophies and you find pictures, or you find a t-shirt or a Dunkin' Donuts cup. I interviewed a woman, Lynette, who lost her son Ross in the Virginia Tech shooting, and she chose to include a computer mouse because he loved to design games and spend time on the computer. And so you enter into these houses, which are deliberately kind of confined so that only a couple of people can be in them at a time, so you have this intimate feeling, and you look at the names, and you look at the dates, and you look at the objects, because they want to move you beyond just gun violence victims being statistics, that these were people who lived, they still live now in the Gun Violence Memorial Project, and they had things, and they had people who loved them and want to share their things.
Why are there 700 clear bricks? Obviously, 700 means something.
700 was the average number of gun deaths every week in the United States in 2019 when this project started. That number is now 840. And I was interviewing them yesterday at the ICA. Jad Diamazi is one of the huge proponents and one of the architects behind this, along with Hank Willis Thomas, who also did the Embrace statue. And they're in this moment trying to figure out, do we keep the Gun Violence Memorial Project as it is to remember this time, or is it expanded? And by the way, I will say, as they reconsider how to do memorials and monuments in each city where this has been presented, like Washington, D.C., Chicago, it will continue on here after Boston. They have collection sites where families show up with their objects, and they work very closely to design how their objects will be displayed here.
It's going to be there on January 20th, by the way, of next year. I'm sorry, Andrea.
No, that's okay. That was one of the reasons that I thought the glass house part was so brilliant, because it is the metaphorical glass house. That it's not just so that people can see it, but the people telling us that we don't need to control guns are really living in these sort of glass houses where their children could become these victims. But I definitely thought about you when I read this, and the other thing I thought about was, this is a lot in its organic nature, a lot like the AIDS quilt.
They took their cues from that.
Oh, really?
Is that true?
That's a very astute observation. Yeah, absolutely.
Where you can sort of, it's text, it's almost textile, and you're being able to see that this seems like such a fabulous, fabulous piece.
I have to say, I found it so impactful. I found myself being more emotional, but other people have talked about the fact that this is a celebratory nature, because we're not letting them go. We're not forgetting them. We're not moving on to the next one, that they get to live here. And as Lynette, again, who lost her son, was telling me yesterday, her brick is deliberately designed to be next to the brick of another person who was lost to gun violence, because she became friends with that person's mother, because they have an ongoing support network. I asked her how often she taps into that, and she said to me, all the time. And Virginia Tech was many years ago now. She told me she never sleeps.
Talking to Jared Bowen.
Well, another one of your topics for today, which sort of hit my spirit, is this mural by Jeffrey Gibson. My mother's mother was full Native American. She was actually adopted at a very young age by a white family, but she was full Native American, and the whole "Your Spirit Whispering in My Ear" mural just hit me like a ton of bricks. Tell people about this mural.
Well, first of all, the backdrop is very exciting, because Jeffrey Gibson is the U.S. representative to the Venice Biennale in Venice right now. For people who don't know, it's this major contemporary art fair that happens obviously every 2 years. And so this is very significant that Jeffrey Gibson is being represented. He's the first indigenous artist to be representing the United States at the Venice Biennale. And now he has designed this major mural on the Greenway. As you say, it's called "Your Spirit Whispering in My Ear." And he's somebody who his ancestry is, he's part of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, and he's also of Cherokee descent. And so he has crafted a mural that looks at as he woke up one night and realized that his ancestors are whispering at him. And it is his responsibility as an artist to take their experiences, what they lived through, what they have passed on through the generations to him, for him to lay it out there. He's also somebody who loves pop culture and color. And so we find a mural that is filled with color. It suggests a rising and setting sun. It depicts the spirits. It depicts these political buttons that he's collected over the years that address everything from feminism to free speech to freedom and peace. And we, at the bottom of the mural, this is again all on the Greenway. If you come out of South Station, you see it towering above you. You find a snake, which suggests rebirth and transformation. So these are all the layers of storytelling that Jeffrey Gibson has incorporated in this mural, which changes about every 1 to 2 years on the Greenway.
I mean, that was one of the great. Whose idea was that originally?
It was the Greenway Conservancy, because they looked at this air intake building and thought we can't have a building there without doing something with it. So they always have a different collaborator, a different museum who comes in and partners with them and helps curate it.
Okay. And they have a digital archive, right? So once the installation moves, can't you see it in the digital? So you can always go and see it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've said before, Jerry, when my kids were young, they're now in their 30s. When my kids were young and they wanted to go to the Galleria, my sense was it was wise to be armed. It was a fairly tough spot in Leechmere or whatever they call it.
The Cambridge Side Galleria?
Oh, my God.
I was down there then. I was at the DA's office. I didn't think it was that dangerous.
If I had known you, I would have called you, let me tell you. But in any case, I don't think you need to be armed anymore. It's a whole different kind of deal. And they have this Harry Potter. I have to say, even before you describe it, because of the behavior of rallying on this trans stuff, I am sort of done with Harry Potter. Having said that, I know that particularly for kids and kids who are inspired to read by Potter, it's a huge thing. So having disparaged every part of this in advance, how great is the exhibit?
It's really, really engaging. And I think that's what you have to do here, is you have to just separate all of the conversation about J.K. Rowling, and this is an exhibition that pulls together the story of the movies. So they don't address the books here at all. They don't address her at all. This is just about the movies, where Warner Brothers has worked with this entertainment company to assemble this exhibition. I have to say, they clearly spent a lot of thought and money on this. So you enter in, it takes about an hour and a half to go through. You get a wristband, you get acclimated.
Where is it, by the way? Where is it in the mall?
Cambridge
Side
Galleria if you're looking at the Cheesecake Factory, it's to the left, because a lot of that whole mall has been remodeled. A lot of it has become biotech or some other office space, and then clearly they've left a huge portion open for exhibitions like this too. Wow. It was my first time there since finding this, and it's huge. They carved out a lot of space there because I guess malls are changing and they don't need as much retail space anymore. But you enter through, you get a wristband, you choose your house, you can see one of the sorting hats from the real films. They have costumes, they have props, they have things of very experiential nature. You can go into what's his name? The giant. Oh my! Suddenly I'm forgetting his name. Hagrid's den. You can sit in his chair. They have scent that follows you along. You pick your Patronus, your spirit that you want to be, and you can pick your wand. By the way, you can see the real wands from the films, and I found it really interesting, especially interesting as they have lots of text that tell you how they made decisions. Like Ron's robe was supposed to be threadbare because he came from a family with a lot of kids, so they didn't have a lot of money to spend on clothing. Harry Potter they thought his should be very finely made because he had access to a lot of money. Lord Voldemort's cape, speaking of the snake that we were just talking about, he has just been reborn, so he should have kind of this translucent skin that's just coming off of him, so that's why they made his big cape and robe out of silk. So you learn all of this, what I thought was pretty interesting history about the films and how deeply they went into the characters.
Can I save people time? You don't have to text me and say, you're so upset with Harry Potter because of how you feel about Rowling. Why do you own a Tesla? I don't have an answer to that question. So let's just move on. You had a wonderful discussion about the great Maggie Smith the other day, and obviously Harry Potter. Look at the look on your face. Yeah. I mean, is there anybody that didn't love, in the world where everybody hates somebody or somebody hates everybody, anybody who didn't love this incredible performer?
I don't think so. I mean, as I said on the show, and as I felt when I learned the news on Friday morning, Maggie Smith was not supposed to die. Yeah. I mean, she's one of those people who was so extraordinary, had such a long career, kept going and going and going, almost until the end. And of course, all of her characters had such life and strength. She, like Queen Elizabeth, I think, was not supposed to die, so this was especially hard and shocking. Then, of course, we at GBH feel like we're even more deeply connected because of Downton Abbey, where she had an even greater late career resurgence. She said that Harry Potter was her pension check. That's why she took those jobs. But she really enjoyed doing Downton Abbey. But, I mean, what a remarkable career. And as you read more about her and the excellence she wanted to bring to her work, the way people could describe her as difficult, she described herself maybe as difficult, but it's because she wanted the best job possible. So she wanted this push and pull. She wanted the tension of getting those roles. I mean, she really was an extraordinary person. I always regretted that I never had the chance to meet her.
I was just going to ask you.
No.
Didn't interview her either.
No.
Yeah.
I did see her on stage once. I saw her on stage.
In what?
Do Breath of Life, David Hare's play in London. It was a two-hander, Maggie Smith and Judi Dench.
Oof.
Wow.
That was pretty incredible to
That's
see
Dame
those two.
Judi Dench.
Dame Judi Dench. By the way, that was the other thing. Everybody, of course, has been talking about her movies and in her Academy Award wins and all of these great roles. But I have found one of the dearest things I ever saw her in was this documentary called Tea with the Dames. I think it was from 2018.
Oh, yeah.
And it was Joan Plowright, Eileen Atkins, Judi Dench, and Maggie Smith. At first, they're sitting outside having tea, just talking about life,
fabulous.
talking about their loves, talking about how they did what they did, again, especially in a time where women didn't always get their due because they go back to mid-century when they were doing works. And then they have to move inside because it starts raining. But you're just, as the audience member, sitting there listening into this conversation with these four extraordinary women who are just talking about people like Laurence Olivier because he brought Maggie Smith out of the theater and into higher roles, and of course married Joan Plowright. So they have great stories to dish.
What's
Two
the name of that
movies.
thing again? I'm sorry. What's the name of the thing?
Tea with the Dames.
Tea with the Dames, yeah.
See The Prime of Miss Jean Brody
Yep.
and Gosford Park if you want two really exceptional Maggie Smith
What's the
movies. Gosford Park.
What is that about?
It's like Downton Abbey, but way, way, way before Downton Abbey. The
And
sort of
Julian
upstairs,
Fellows wrote it.
downstairs. And Julian
Oh.
Fellows did write that. That's right.
Yeah.
Sort of the upstairs, downstairs thing.
Also California Suite.
Yes, and California Suite, that's also a very good one.
You know, speaking of Downton Abbey and its impact, is what's the name of the butler? What was the name of the butler?
In Downton Abbey?
Yeah.
Well, Thomas was the evil butler who was so fun to watch. Mr. Carson, is that what you're talking about?
He was on, Marjorie and I interviewed him when he was in one day for some, and I have to say the excitement in the building that day was greater than if the President of the United States had walked into the lobby. There was such widespread love for this thing that your good buddy and ours, Rebecca Eaton, was responsible for it. Masterpiece. It was just, what a phenomenon.
And how nice. They were all so nice.
That is totally true.
So many of them came over for events over the years, and they were all just so nice. They were all bemused, frankly, that people were so this excited about them. They got to go to basketball games in the White House. It was super fun for them.
By the way, I have great news for you. Since we ran out of time, you can come back at the end of the show to tell us what you're doing on your show at 2 o'clock.
It's now one of my favorite parts of my day to do that. It is. We have fun.
Wow.
Thank you, Jared.
We do?
We do.
We do. Yeah, I think we do. Okay, fine.
I'm telling you, you have fun.
I'm glad to know that. We'll talk to you a little later.
All right.
Good to see you, Jared. We've been speaking with Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor for GBH and host of the
Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com. Out in space, the weather gets wacky. On the next Nova, discover the forces driving the dramatic weather on neighboring planets and moons. Catch Solar Systems, Storm Worlds, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted, local, news. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
and the impact and diversity of the Latino vote in this election. Then it's our text-in question of the day. An Alaskan park's annual Fat Bear contest was sullied after one of the bears attacked and killed his competition for food. On Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden says his administration is sending in as many as 1,000 active duty soldiers to North Carolina to help the National Guard deliver life-saving supplies to survivors of Hurricane Helene and its aftermath. Biden is visiting the state today. He sees neighbors also leaning on each other. NPR's Jennifer Ludden reports that's what's happening in eastern Tennessee.
The scale of regular people pitching in to help is striking. I met Matthew Johnson, who had set up a roadside tent in Newport, Tennessee. He had shut down the pizzeria he owns in Knoxville, an hour away, and he spent 2 days here just grilling up hundreds of hot dogs and burgers and chicken sandwiches to give out.
I'm from Florida. I've been through a lot of these. These people over here have never been through something like this, so they don't understand what it takes, what it's going to be, and how long it's going to last.
In one neighborhood that was hit hard by flooding, one young man was using his forklift to take people's furniture to the dump.
That's NPR's Jennifer Ludden reporting. North Carolina is one of 6 states severely affected by deadly floodwaters, mudslides, and widespread power outages. The Associated Press reports the death toll has surpassed 160. Republican J.D. Vance and Democrat Tim Walz faced off last night in the only vice presidential debate and the last scheduled debate in this presidential election. NPR's Domenico Montanaro says there was no clear winner, but there was one notable change.
The one thing that stood out was the version of J.D. Vance who showed up on stage. And Vance has been a hard-charging MAGA warrior who's made several missteps since being named Trump's running mate. That persona was gone during the debate. He's had the lowest favorability ratings of any vice presidential running mate in modern history, and he tried to present himself as more agreeable and polite than Trump, or frankly the version of himself that's gotten attention for controversial statements throughout the campaign. Overall, this debate likely won't change this race at all because the most important rule of being a running mate is first, do no harm, and there were really no major mistakes made by either candidate last night. Domenico Montanaro, NPR News, Washington.
The Israeli government has banned United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres from entering the country. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi reports.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been declared persona non grata in Israel, according to a statement released by the Israeli Foreign Ministry. Foreign Minister Israel Katz said Guterres has not, quote, unequivocally condemned Iran's heinous attack on Israel and does not deserve to, quote, set foot on Israeli soil. Iran fired about 180 missiles, according to the Israeli military, on Tuesday night, sending millions of people across Israel to bomb shelters. Guterres had issued a statement condemning the, quote, broadening of the Middle East conflict with escalation after escalation. Israel and the UN have had a tense relationship since the beginning of the war in Gaza.
This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Worcester City officials are acknowledging that more still needs to be done to get federal pandemic relief money into the hands of grassroots community organizations. Excuse me. Small nonprofits that work with people disproportionately impacted by the pandemic say they're not getting their fair share of the funding. Even when they do receive money, the city's strict paperwork requirements make it hard for them to spend it. At a city council meeting last night, city manager Eric Batista said he could have made better decisions distributing the money.
Some of the challenges is we want to get as much information as we can, so when eventually this money is spent, we can then come back to the council and to the public of how these monies were impacted, right? What census tract did we serve?
Batista said the majority of the money is used up, but he'll try to be more flexible with any remaining funds. The Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, begins at sunset today. The holiday marks a time of renewal and is generally celebrated by eating apples and honey for a sweet new year. But this year, the anniversary of the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel weighs heavy for many. With that said, on behalf of all of us here at the GBH Foundation, we wish all of those who celebrate a safe and healthy new year. Shana Tova. In sports, the Revolution are in Houston tonight for a soccer game. Sun clouds, mid-60s today. Light clouds overnight tonight, low in the 50s. Sun clouds near 70 tomorrow. 64 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Schwab, with Schwab investing themes like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, or pet passion. Over 40 themes to invest in. Learn more at schwab.com. And the Doris Duke Foundation.
Welcome to hour number 2, Boston Public Radio. I am Jim Browdy. Andrea Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, is sitting in for Marjorie. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello again, Jim.
Marjorie is back tomorrow. And we're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us here on Tuesday of next week from noon to 1 to take your questions and ours. One last reminder about our text prompt of the day. It's about Fat Bear Week. By the way, if you don't know what that is, Google it and then do something. The annual contest was sullied and delayed after one of the bears mauled and killed a competitor. Who said, oh, you? Okay. Yeah. Seen by everyone watching the live stream. We want to know, Fat Bear Week has been a low-stakes, supposedly fun refuge from politics. Now this, you still into it? Text us your Fat Bear Week thoughts at 877-301-8970. And we'll read some of them right before the 1 o'clock news. We're joined now by national security expert Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's a former assistant secretary for Homeland Security under President Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer for The Atlantic. Hello, Juliette.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Juliette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out.
Hello.
Woo, I got to woo.
We're asking.
I think it was your producer.
Go ahead.
Well, I have to follow the Fat Bear story, so I need something.
Yeah, that's
I
a
need
very
you
good
people.
point. No,
Thank
that's
you.
a very good point. Yeah.
We're asking everybody who stops by today what their reaction to the debate was. What was yours?
I think, I'm be honest here. I think Vance is good, and we'll watch out 2028. But assuming that Trump goes away, which I'm not convinced of if he loses, and he. But two things. One, that was a lot of word salad about opposing abortion rights, and I think it's clear they got the clip that they needed. The clip that they really needed, the Democrats need, and was excellent, was he blew all of that goodwill on the last question. And I wish the January 6th one, which I wish had been the first question. I kept saying, like, why is it taking so long to get to the question, why are you here, J.D. Vance? You're not
Mike Pence.
Mike Pence. So I thought those two were compelling. I'm looking at the quick polls afterwards, and it's clear it doesn't matter what I think.
Total partisan.
Yeah, I mean, but the independents liked him, liked Walz and
Walz.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what it's showing, because I think they don't like the 2020 nonsense and the anti-democracy. No, just the insurrection.
Oh, the insurrection.
If Vance could not answer the question, did President Biden win the election? Right. It's like yes, no. It's a yes/no question. I just think that's going to be the narrative. The day two, that's going to be the narrative.
Yeah. Well, it's one last thing about that. I talked about how I thought Walz was unprepared for a number of things he knew were coming, particularly the thing about Hong Kong and Tiananmen Square. But J.D. Vance was totally unprepared. Well, he was prepared, but wrongly so. To answer that question about who won, well, how about Kamala Harris and censorship? The average person is saying, censorship? Yeah. What are we talking about? Talk about an imbalance, and it was a weak moment. My only concern is it's such a huge issue. I would argue the most important issue in the race. Walz should have raised it, no matter what the question was.
Exactly. And number
early
one,
I'm standing next to a guy whose boss attempted to overthrow the government of the United States.
He wouldn't have done it, but it would have been hilarious if every answer he begins with, well, Vice President Pence, I'm sorry, J.D. Vance. Like, just constantly remind people there's a reason why Pence is not there. Right. And that is because he almost got hung. It's so absurd.
No,
I'm sorry.
it's true.
January 6th.
The other part of that is that as recently as 2 or 3 days ago, Vance said, I would do what Pence wouldn't do. So it's not even like it's sort of, we're moving, when he says we're moving forward, we're not moving forward. You plan to do the very thing that Mike Pence wouldn't do.
Yeah, he has a line that he says now, which I don't even get it. J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
I don't get what he means. He says something like, I would have opened it up to debate. Right, which in terms of the certification, it clearly means you won't accept the
results,
lawful. Right. But it's like this weird thing. It's like, well, I think the debate actually is decided on November 5th, and we're just counting at that stage. But anyway, I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see.
Well, it's also going to be an ad, even though it's at the end of the thing. The good news, if people believe that overthrowing the government is a bad thing or attempting to overthrow it, I assume we're going to see an ad if it's not out already.
That's exactly it. It's a yes/no answer.
Yeah.
We do have some debate sound for you.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, because they did talk about the Middle East.
Yes.
So let's play the clip of the shot from the debate. Both candidates on the Middle East.
Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental. and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack.
It is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
You know, before you ask your
question, except for Ukraine,
which never came up last night either, despite Vance saying, I don't give a damn about Ukraine. The other thing, I forgot about this earlier, Walz never answered the question that was asked, which was, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel and Iran? Vance did. And the correct answer, if you want to avoid controversy, is Israel makes a decision. They're our ally, whether you believe that or not. So,
and it also wouldn't be preemptive at this stage.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't even understand that. First of all, that question, that was the first question, was like 10 minutes long. I don't know that CBS.
I agree.
Yeah, I was like, oh, can we get to the question? Like she just, and it also had a falsity in it. This idea that she said that Iran would get a nuclear weapon within 1 to 2 weeks. That's absolutely not true. But finally, at the end of that answer, and the return to that answer, Governor Walz finally says, look, there's a reason why we're here. It's because on day one, Trump walked away from the deal that now Trump is saying we need a deal. So
he eventually said it.
So what do I think? I mean, I think as far as these things go, I think we don't know how Israel is going to respond. Right now, this was another, like in the spring, this was Iran sort of asserting its power and sometimes powerlessness when it feels like it needs to because of Israel going into Lebanon on a ground offense. I don't know how Israel's going to respond. I don't think they need to respond, and because we sort of go through this every 6 months, and they're already. I mean, they're already responding. They're in Lebanon. Like, I don't even understand this. Like, this worries about a regional conflict. I think this is a regional conflict at this stage. I mean, it's not a full-out war.
How can you prosecute 3 wars, though? I mean, there's Gaza. There's Lebanon, which we'll talk about. We started talking about. We'll talk about in a second. And then there's potentially a back and forth with Iran, as sophisticated as their military.
And don't forget
the
Houthis in Yemen.
So, how scared should we be as citizens of the world? I know we're not supposed to say that anymore in the era of Trump. About a real serious war breaking out, as opposed, not that these things are insignificant, particularly in Gaza, by the way, I should say. So how fearful should we be? So it's
interesting. I mean, I think we should be fearful, just given yesterday, or the last 48 hours, both the infiltration apparently in a limited ground war, as Israel's calling it, into Lebanon, where they're trying to eradicate Hezbollah. They are calling Iran and Hezbollah's bluff at this stage. Hezbollah just thought it could just sort of lob lots of bombs and make Israelis evacuate from northern Israel, and I think it's clear. Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that Israel won't tolerate that anymore. But how this ends, we don't know at this stage, and I think I think the White House is just waiting to see how is Netanyahu going to respond. They're not skirmishes, but these limited actions that we see on Israel's part are sustainable. We don't have to get into a regional conflict. It's just, at some stage, is Israel going to up the ante? I think no. At this stage, they've got plenty on their plate. None of this gets resolved until Gaza gets resolved.
Well, how about upping? I'm sorry.
I think. I just want to say, I do think there's a variable that I don't like how it unfolds, and it would be terrorist attacks in Israeli cities, suicide.
Well, there was a terrorist attack yesterday, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, but like the
not
Intifada.
Like October 7th.
Like exactly. Yeah. Like that. If you saw something like that happen, for my friends in Israel, let alone Lebanon, the cities are relatively back to normal, and Beirut is certainly it's thriving to the extent Beirut can thrive. But I talk to people in Israel and I talk to people in Lebanon. I think of these activities, these armed activities, start to impact the major cities, we'll start to see a difference.
But isn't the real fear on the part of the United States and on the part of millions of people in Israel that it's Netanyahu's own agenda that will cause the escalation. Because if you step back the way you've described it, what you said is reasonable. He doesn't actually have to respond.
Right.
But his poll numbers went up when he killed Nasrallah, and focusing on Hezbollah as opposed to what's been done in Gaza gets him a little of that popularity back and gives him more leverage and gives him some wins. So they're really, they're not necessarily worried about the honest brokering of how the situation works out and what comes next. I think they're more worried about Netanyahu's pursuing his own
agenda. I agree
agenda.
with that, but Netanyahu has to win. I mean, you saw the same numbers in terms of polling after the terrorist attacks in October, certainly a very legitimate kill of Hezbollah's leadership and its top-ranking leadership. But the longer this goes on, it's harder for him to sustain that narrative because Israelis out in full force do not like what they're seeing in Gaza. If you replicate that in Lebanon, where people are sleeping in the streets in Beirut, or you
and a million
or you
have
start
been
to
displaced.
lose,
A million.
and I mean, if you start to lose Israeli soldiers, that's going to be a very different issue as well, right? I mean, we know this. These are air wars right now. We'll see what happens in Lebanon, but Israel has a bad history of ground game in Lebanon, and Netanyahu certainly remembers that.
You two were talking about one element of this, the political advantage that Netanyahu has gotten, at least so far, from this multifaceted set of wars he's engaged in. We also know that he supports Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, even though Vance was not very effective at this last night, even though he tried, the more chaos there is in the world, the less it accrues to the benefit of Kamala Harris. And so that may be an agenda too. Having a Trump in the White House is clearly something that would make Netanyahu's life
He
better,
only has to hold out 30 more days. Yeah.
So
it would make, let's just say it would make Trump and Kushner's lives better too. Right.
The other last thing, this is a tired old question, but it so aggravates me. When the greatest ally of Israel has been the United States, despite its displeasure about the unnecessary, disproportionate number of deaths in Gaza, and Netanyahu doesn't even consult with the United States or notify them before the execution of the leader of Hezbollah, and almost treating Biden as a second team player here. Is it purely politics that has caused Biden to be not to be more confrontational with Netanyahu for fear that it's going to cost his candidate Kamala Harris come November 5th?
I don't know, because that's been going on a long time in terms of the acquiescence to Netanyahu. I mean, it's
not like acquiescence. Netanyahu is being totally disrespectful of its greatest ally.
Exactly.
And
I mean, it's got the Democratic Party has a challenge, right? Which is it's trying to thread the needle between Democrats who are very aligned with Israel, and then, of course, a much more progressive wing of the party that is looking at Gaza and what's happening to the Palestinians. I will say, one of the reasons why you have cabinet secretaries is that you can say something, you can have them say something that maybe the president doesn't. And I think Blinken has been really strong. I think he's been remarkable on Ukraine, remarkable on some of these diplomatic efforts. But, I've said this publicly. I will say it again. The first words that came out of Blinken's mouth when he went to Israel a year ago was, "I come here as a Jew." Before American and Secretary of State. And to me, he could have been a much more forceful counter to our understanding, because he doesn't have to play the politics. He's not running to Biden's. And that role has been somewhat picked up by the Secretary of Defense. But I wonder if an accounting of Blinken, and this is me just reading what other people are saying in many ways, is going to be that Blinken missed this opportunity to give voice to the Palestinians that Biden might not be able to. Harris is doing it. And when I say voice, I don't mean Israel gives up or lets Hamas does what it wants. It is the disproportionate response that has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians. No one in government, until Harris said those words at the convention, is giving voice to that horror and to the reality that the effort counterterrorism effort by Israel was not that. It was not a counterterrorism effort.
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
So Juliette, as I said before, I was very envious when you got to go to the Olympics, but I was very impressed at the way that France built this sort of resiliency development into building an Olympic village, but it's meant to last and be resilient. You wrote a piece for The Atlantic, what your insurer is trying to tell you about climate change.
About a year ago,
And I hadn't really thought of it in these terms until I read this, that we are so not forward-thinking, and we just keep paying for the same kinds of damage over and over again, and not thinking, hey, wouldn't it be cheaper if we actually built in a way that prevented this from happening the next time?
Right. And this is I write a lot on recovery. That's where a lot of my work is now. Recovery being obviously we're still in response to. In light of Hurricane Helene, just to remind everyone, we've now reached over 160 dead. That makes it the third largest casualty hurricane since 2000.
There's still 400 or 500 or 600 still missing, aren't there?
I think it's going to hit 1,000. I think it's going to be closer to Katrina than it is to Sandy. It just bypassed Sandy, which was, of course,
just looking at the communities that would just level. It's just
and
sticks.
the numbers and the people missing and stuff. So now we talk about recovery and getting them all the resources they need, and the data and the history of sort of post-mega disaster recoveries, what's successful and what's not, is you got to deliver on what's called functionality. I hate to sound so generic about it, but it's just basically your water, your electricity. We know that, but that one should take their time to be able to build more resilient, more impactful, better prepared for the next time. Houses, infrastructure, and businesses.
Can you really be prepared for? I mean, considering the ferocity of these storms and the frequency, can you be prepared?
Well, it's funny you say that. This was such a fluke in some ways. Like, would it happen again? There was a hospital that some of them have these water walls essentially, and just sort of protect itself. They just brought it up. I think yes. I think. It depends on what you're saving for. So I think about First Life, of course. I think there are lessons to be learned about what was being projected. Why weren't people prepared for this kind of flood? I mean, the soil was saturated. We knew that from days before. That's why it was such a fluke, is that you had lots of water coming. If the land was dry, it wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have been a big deal, but it wouldn't have been such a big deal. It was that there was nowhere for the water to go. That's why you have the water rising. So I think there are lessons to learn, but there are techniques, including just building your house, with 4 feet of brick. Right, that's going to get you pretty far.
I asked you off the piece you wrote for The Atlantic that Andrea mentioned. I asked you this when you wrote it, and I forget your answer. When like Allstate stopped writing insurance policies in California, I think it was last year. Does every state have some fail-safe backup insurance, even if it's less comprehensive than you can buy?
Every state does. Every state, all 50, they're called something different in Massachusetts or Florida. Now when I wrote that piece, 1 in every 5 or 6 Floridians have their insurance only through the stopgap. And that's only going to get worse after this hurricane, because insurance companies will leave. The point is this, that I don't want insurance companies setting public policy unless public policy is able to adapt to what's happening. And then I'm more than glad that insurance companies are stepping in and saying, we're not going to pay for this to come back, or we're only going to rebuild your home if you do X, Y, or Z. The insurance companies doing what they are doing is because they're not being regulated by any sound public policy that is preparing us for the kind of climate impacts that we're having. So they're able to set the conditions.
Are insurance companies still writing policies in the seaport? Forget the South.
I'm sure that there are conditions on it. I know that there's zoning rules about where you can live. So I think there's like first floor residential rules and stuff. But even if you had a way of thinking about zoning, if you're the mayor What do you zone for? When you allow leases or sales to private sector, could you make demands on them for the whole area in terms of seawalls?
That's the part I don't understand.
Yeah, all of this is the authority resides in the localities, and they can use it. I think I talked about this when I got back from Oklahoma, and that's a red state. I mean, it doesn't get more red than that, but I was doing work there. On the response to the tornadoes. They have a community, Oklahoma, got hit by an EF5, devastating. An EF5 you just never hear of. There hasn't been an EF5 tornado since. They took sort of this window, about 10 months that they had to say, we're not going to allow we're not going to allow permanent restructures until we figure out how we want homes to be built. Now they have these regulations. They are now thriving. The homes can get insurance. The prices are competitive, and it's a thriving community. And they sell tornado readiness as a as a market plus to potential families.
Okay.
And I think that's right. I think the market is going to want it. No one wants to lose their kids.
But let me ask this.
Mostly.
If certain states, I think some states do it on a larger scale, but if cities and towns, and they do this in Massachusetts, certain cities and towns are able to build in resiliency planning for commercial development.
They can do it for homeowners.
And they just use their local town ordinances, their local laws, and say, if you're going to build new right here, you're going to build out your drainage system for a 1,000-year storm.
And you're going to put your electrical grid on that. Yeah.
How is it so starving to build that up?
It's not hard. I mean, it is, and you can scale it. You can definitely scale it. I mean, one community at a time. But this is in the knowable, doable range. But that no one is doing it means that you then have the market coming in and making risk decisions based on their own calculation, which is
based on revenue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I played this sound the other day, and I was taken to task by two friends of mine for not saying something. So we're going to play it again. This is Donald Trump. When I originally played the sound, I was playing it to show this guy will lie about anything that gives him political advantage. Here's Trump. He had a news conference in Valdosta, Georgia. And you'll hear what he says about the non-response from the White House. And then you'll hear the Republican governor, who actually allegedly supports Trump, telling the truth. Here it is.
The governor's doing a very good job. He's having a hard time getting the president on the phone. I guess they're not being responsive.
I just spoke. The president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that.
So beyond the lying, the point that two of my friends made, which is very true, is Trump not only cares only about himself, he doesn't give it. You're a person in Georgia or any of these states that is suffering, and you're worried who's going to come to the literal and figurative rescue. And one of the two candidates says, the White House isn't even returning the calls of your governor. So it's not only selfish and deceitful, it's also so cruel to people who are suffering through this pain. It's unbelievable.
I mean, that he would be political about
everything,
including a hurricane. This is just a flat out line. This is not like they could be doing more. What I think is interesting is that the Republican governors in these impacted states are pushing back on that narrative, mostly because they know that is not true, but also I think
they want the help.
It's responsible. Their people have to work out in the field with FEMA, the White House, and everyone else. They do not want to be in a position where there is ill will because this stupid person is sort of saying lies about what's going on. And it's not just he lies about everything. I mean, I just think about COVID. Like, he so panics whenever confronted with a life or death issue for his citizens that all he can do is lash out, and it's a psychological issue
because
at this stage,
he feels nothing for them.
Yeah.
He is a psychopath.
And he didn't even bring paper towels to throw to the people.
Sponges. They needed sponges. They needed sponges.
Remember that moment in Puerto Rico, by the way, in terms of the crassest of the crass. It's whatever.
Yeah, so we'll see. But I have a piece coming out in the Atlantic tomorrow.
About
so
what?
About the hurricane.
Oh,
tomorrow
great.
or Friday.
Hurricane in politics or just hurricane in recovery?
Information.
Okay.
How did we get information during this hurricane and some of the challenges? But I do think that the National Weather Service, which did a good job, there are lessons to be learned even from the federal side about, say, look, the pre-existing...
Didn't you tell me Project 2025
I was just going to say, let's not forget, Project 2025 will do away from it.
Yeah,
so you'll die in a disaster, but you won't even know it's coming, so you won't know when it hits.
It doesn't everyone want to go that way.
Yeah.
But so anyway, that's about it. I'll see you next week.
Well, yes, you will. Thank you, Juliette.
Thank you very much.
It's
Ask
good to see
me
you.
my fat bear.
Why don't you text in?
I didn't even know what it was. I got to go look
That's
now.
great. Check it out.
You just ruined my entire afternoon.
Indeed. Goodbye.
Go
Nice
down a
to
rabbit
see you.
hole on that one. We've been speaking with national security expert Juliette Kayyem. She's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And she's also a contributing writer for The Atlantic, has a piece coming out tomorrow. Up next, Imari Jeffries of Embrace Boston joins to preview their Arts and Culture Summit. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
It all goes back to a city's failure.
Busing is just one symptom of a very sick system that had been sick for a long time.
A failure to reform.
People just kind of doubled down and said, this can't happen.
A failure to protect.
Can you imagine just being heated?
A failure to reckon with the fallout.
How do you then begin to think about erasing that kind of experience from your psyche? You don't.
Never Cried, Boston's busing legacy. Now playing on the GBH News YouTube channel.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And the MBTA Commuter Rail, providing public transportation service to over 170 cities and towns in Massachusetts. Just take the train. You can plan your trip at mbta.com/massbytrain.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Cabral, former Secretary of Public Safety, is in for Marjorie. Marjorie's back tomorrow. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will be here on Tuesday for an hour from noon to 1. And I'm not going to tease the whole fat bear thing yet again. I can't do it anymore. We'll read your texts at whatever it is, 5 minutes to 1. Joined now by Imari Jeffries. He's the president and CEO of Embrace Boston, and he joins us monthly. Imari, it's good to see you.
Great seeing you both.
Always good to see you. I was just asking him how remember the last time he was here, he was going to a wedding? He had just gotten his hair cut. We were asking him. So I said, how was the wedding? Remember that?
And?
It was fantastic.
It was?
I think I was a hit. I was walking around with models, and it was fun.
What do you mean you're walking around with models?
Remember, he was full of models. That was he was going to his...
That's right. Yeah. My wife went to school with someone who was a finalist on America's Next Top Model, and so I knew I was going to be there with models, so I had to look my best. I didn't want to embarrass her, of course, so... Had to get a haircut.
Well, I think it's excellent you're saying how good you look, by the way. It's very humble of you. It really, it's
very
really,
validating.
The humility is beautiful, Imari. Good to see you.
I had to work it up.
So we're asking every one of our guests today who saw the debate what their reaction to the debate was.
You know, I was pleasantly surprised of how civil it was. And I think it speaks in the moment in time where a civil debate is a standard in which we could, give a check to. I was surprised, like a lot of folks, how charming Vance was. I thought he didn't do as bad as most of us thought he would. He didn't really answer any questions, but I think we knew that. I think he didn't, he wasn't going to answer questions, and this kind of idea of not fact-checking in real time was, made it a little bit fuzzy. I think it let him off the hook.
I could use a little less civility last night, by the way. I'm generally a pro-civility kind of guy, but I'm not sure. Why are you laughing? Okay, so I'm not pro-civility.
That was like a Vance level statement.
That was a lie.
Absolutely.
Okay, take that back.
They were trying to out-charm each other, and that was nice. It was a breath of fresh air for our presidential election.
Yeah, maybe so. I'm not sure it accomplished goals, though. But in any case, I don't mean to get in the thing, but I'm not sure that was the night for it. It's good to see you anyway, Imari, regardless of your position on the debate. Thank you very much.
Now, we have talked with a number of folks on the show about this particular story. Shirley Leung wrote a piece about this sort of, seems like almost sudden and significant exodus of black CEOs from Boston. And we talked to Shirley about it. We're going to talk to Mike Curry about it later on today. What do you, how do you account for it? And do you think it's a time to sort of panic or worry?
Well, Mike and I had a conversation right before that story went out, and so we were talking, and there were a few more names I added to the list that he was thinking about that didn't quite make it. I am a little worried. I think we are both worried. Now, we both know that some of the individuals left for different reasons, better jobs, some folks wasn't good fit, changes in administration. But in aggregate, when we think about a group of black leaders leaving, this attack on legislation that supports civil rights, this emergence of right-wing thinking. We're in the midst of this third Reconstruction, and what has happened in the other two Reconstructions, we've seen a backtrack. And so it's no surprise that most of us would be worried that this would signal some of that, again, backtracking that we've seen with the affirmative action cases.
Yeah, but the critical thing, and Shirley made this point, I said it to her face, good for her for saying what needed to be said here. Two things struck me that she wrote about. One, in that piece and the piece before, saying almost the exact same thing about the leadership of Harvard, that we're people of color. In both cases, the vast majority of those CEOs and the people at Harvard were replaced by people who were not of color, white people, which to me exposes the performative nature of what lots of companies and universities did after the killing of George Floyd. That's the first reflection. And if I may quote myself a little further, it is really troubling to me after this black CEO story came out by Shirley that white leaders in the business community, at least I haven't heard it, and maybe I missed the story, and if I did, I apologize, have not stood up and said, this is intolerable. This is unacceptable. It is backsliding, even if it was not specifically a racist in nature. We have to make sure that we not only move people of color into positions of power, but keep them in positions of power. It was like crickets. Am I missing something?
Yeah, that is the important part. Again, if you look at that list of leaders, many of them left for different reasons. The important piece would be the lack of backsliding. We have to ensure that some of the gains we've made in leadership are sustained, are advanced, that we include women of color, people with disabilities, indigenous folks as well. And so, we have to be mindful that there's no backsliding there, that we don't lose the numbers that we gain as a result of this national catastrophe with the murder in George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And, 2023 was on record the highest reported number of police killings in the country, and we're not talking about it in that way. We've moved on this kind of TikTok short-term memory that gets us to not focus long-term on these issues. And there's certain organizations like Embrace and others, Michael Curry, that need to, and this story, what it does is it illuminates what we need to be mindful of.
But how do you do that when it has never been, and will likely never be, as big a problem for the white CEOs that Jim references, and for the white population at large? Racism will never be as big a problem for them as the people who are affected by it. And if you're in that decision-making position, how do you get at that?
And folks like Colette Phillips and others talk about the economic case for diversity, right? And so we know that, right? Teams that are more diverse tend to do better, perform better than teams that are not. Our country is one of the most diverse countries in the world, right? And so we're trying this great American experiment to put people from different backgrounds, different races together to succeed, to create democracy. It's hard, it's difficult. It's never going to be linear, it's never going to be clean, and I think this is part of that struggle. I think there's folks who work to ensure that this happens. Folks who are of color, and folks from Beckman will talk about that, black and brown businesses tend to hire black and brown people. And so there's something to be said about women and people of color in leadership positions and the opportunities they provide to other people of color. And so we have to ensure, and I think this is why this story is so important, we have to ensure that those members, those individuals are in leadership positions of prominent institutions.
Have you talked to any of those, that 10, about why they left? Or
I did, and I don't think some of them wanted to be named in that way because they left for different reasons. I think the story, in aggregate, when you think about some of the most prominent leaders left under not so great circumstances, and so you take some of the individuals that left because of other opportunities, or their kids were moving, or they were moving to take care of loved ones, and lump them in a story, I don't think they were that excited about that. But the aggregate of the black leaders retracting is an important story, and although some of them would not like to be mentioned in the story, it's something that we need to be mindful of as racial equity practitioners.
Talking to Imari Jeffries from Embrace Boston.
So I almost couldn't finish the second story just because I'm just tired of this happening. It was inevitable. Everybody knew when SCOTUS made the decision wiping out affirmative action, knew exactly what was going to happen. So there is some data that is now out that says that first-year enrollment for black students declined sharply at some top Massachusetts colleges. In one case, I think they surveyed some 30 colleges. In another case, I think it might have been the 11 top colleges. And there certainly is an argument made by someone who's quoted in the story about this is a pendulum that should swing back to more normal numbers. But what was your reaction to, especially the MIT numbers, the UMass Amherst numbers? Talk a little bit about those percentages that dropped and what your reaction was to that.
You know, I wasn't surprised. There are a lot of organizations that are committed to racial equity that are nervous, right? We've seen organizations like the Fearless Fund be sued by organizations that have put equity.
Is that the Black Women Fund in Georgia?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
right. And so organizations that care about equity, particularly some higher ed institutions, full disclosure, I'm on the board of trustees of the University of Massachusetts system. I know that that institution cares about equity. And so there's a carefulness that some institutions are taking. And if we think about it, and I wrote some of this down just for context, most of the affirmative action cases have been litigated in higher education. So we have California versus Bakke, 1978, Gratz versus Bollinger 1 and Bollinger 2. That's Michigan, Fisher versus Texas 1 and 2, and then this ultimate Harvard case. And so there's this continuation of equity and diversity being litigated on college campuses, this bastion of economic opportunity that college campuses lend itself is the gateway to opportunity in America, at least in our minds, right? Younger people are thinking differently about higher education. And so it's not surprising that this is the space that these cases, this is the space where the controversy around what equity means would happen in higher education institutions. I'm not surprised. I think colleges want to be careful. It's tough to be, Lee Pelton, a great friend of mine, talks about it's tough to be a college president these days. And so I think colleges are trying to be careful. Presidents are trying to be careful.
Too careful, though?
I think a little bit too careful. And so I think I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all.
Can I speak? I'm so glad you said too careful.
Yeah.
Blum, the guy who brought the lawsuit against Harvard, North Carolina, that led to the affirmative action decision, unlike our side, is relentless.
Right.
This list of elite universities where the percentage of black first-year kids did not go down. I think it was Duke and Princeton. He's starting an investigation of them, threatening to sue them because your numbers should have gone down by definition. That's the kind of relentlessness when people, I'm not praising him, by the way.
Publicly, you could not have kept up those ratios because what's not said is because we know they can't get in unless you give them a leg up.
That's exactly right. But the bottom line is you don't have to admire what he stands for. I admire the fact that he never gives an inch to the opposition, and we're twiddling our thumbs about this.
And folding.
Exactly, and folding. Exactly, and it's hard.
Well, some college presidents are, and I'm not making excuses for them. I'm always going to push in the direction of equity and diversity. But some college presidents, at the end of the day, they feel responsible to raise money and to ensure that their endowments and their coffers are intact. A lot of colleges and universities are struggling, and so we're going to see a decline in college enrollment. 20 years ago, we knew that the birth rate in America was declining, and so colleges and universities are having to attract international students in order to keep the lights on. And so that's a big responsibility of college presidents these days, and I think they're worried about their endowments, they're worried about their donors, and so that's a factor that they're considering in making these decisions.
Let me channel Marjorie Egan, who's not here, and say to that, Is $50 billion not enough for Harvard University? I mean, Khalil Gibran Muhammad was here a couple of weeks ago, and I'm sure he's sick of it. Every time a professor at Harvard, who's is going to Princeton, by the way, every time he's here, we mention the same thing, which probably aggravates him. He was singled out by name by Chairman Fox of the Education Committee, that Virginia Fox, that committee, and said essentially his course at the Kennedy School is the root of all evil. That's what's wrong with the country. That's why, like this. And we asked him last time he was here if any of the hierarchy of Harvard called him, came to his defense publicly. President, no. Interim President Garber, no. And he said the dean or the something at the Kennedy School sent him a text. And I made a joke was, I could text you privately too. Did anybody defend you publicly? And the answer was no. It is what doesn't that tell you everything you need to know? That they're either total, and I don't just mean the Harvard types, I mean all these leaders, they're either cowards or what they really believed in was not what they said they believed in a couple of years ago. Is that unfair?
But before they failed to defend him, they failed to defend Claudine Gay. So, I mean, it is a pattern, and it is this sort of, when you have Bill Ackerman, who gives you millions and millions of dollars, say he's sort of an anti-DEI guy, and I'll pull my funding. And it was happening, admittedly was happening when the protests were happening, and there was all of what was happening between Jewish students and Palestinian students. I get all of that. But you can't call yourself a bastion of higher education when you're not willing to go to court, be the first one on the courthouse steps to defend it.
I know it's complicated. It's complicated. In Harvard, the head of the Ed School, who's black, is no longer there. The head of the Legacy of Slavery Project is no longer there. The head of the Chan School is no longer there, right? And so in Harvard, I think there's a huge, and they were not mentioned in the story. There's a huge exodus of black leaders at Harvard. You're right. I think.
Well, Shirley did mention that in her prior story about the exodus of black leaders at Harvard. Go ahead,
yeah. So but at the end of the day, college presidents feel like their responsibility is to, or one of them, is to make sure that alumni and donors are feeling good about making their donations there. And there's a lot of pressure on them to not lose that dollar.
We're talking to Imari Paris Jeffries.
So, Imari, there isn't a soul, I think, who knows him who doesn't love him. And, of course, I'm talking about Jose Masso. Jose's been around for the longest time and he does good wherever he goes. You had an event that basically celebrated Jose Masso, but celebrated so much more. Talk about the event and the cultural diversity and richness that it celebrated.
Yeah, and so many people don't know, 50 years he would have been on the air.
But you are, by the way. It's incredible.
I think you two know. I don't know much about those types of shows, but 50 years sounds like a long time. I don't know of a show, maybe Meet the Press or right. 60 Minutes have been on longer in a continuous manner.
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy, right? Exactly. Right. They keep replacing people.
Egan and Browdy, and that's right.
That's right. And so we wanted to honor him, and as many people know, he is one of the 70 people on the 1965 Freedom Rally Plaza.
That was so fabulous that you did that. I mean, just fabulous.
Yeah. And he was one of the younger. There's roughly 8 folks that are still with us. Marvin Gilmore, who's on the plaza,
just turned 100.
Just turned 100 years old. And so at the beginning of Latino Hispanic Heritage Month, we wanted to illuminate his presence and the promise and the presence of Afro-Latinos in Boston. As we know, in some reports, the black population in Massachusetts has declined, but not really. The Afro-Latino population, which makes up part of the black population, has actually increased 65,000 Afro-Latinos that are in Massachusetts. So it is one of the largest emerging black groups in our Commonwealth. And so we wanted to celebrate them. We wanted to illuminate their importance as Latinos and as black folks. And so we had this festival at the Embrace to really kick off Hispanic Heritage Month,
which runs through mid-October. I have to say, Marjorie and I, what was the thing that Marjorie and I came to at Mass College of Art that you did that was spectacular with Wilkerson and?
We went to, it was the Embrace Ideas Festival.
You are as good a convener as I've seen in my years here, you and your colleagues. And often, I think this will not surprise Andrea, often I go to these things and I'm saying, really? I mean, is this for donors? Or this is such crap and so useless. Your stuff is so provocative. Am I right or am I right?
No, he's being completely honest.
Exactly.
He does say those kinds of
Your
things.
stuff is so different. It's incredible. And you have another thing come. I don't know how you turn this stuff out so fast. November 7th.
My staff is going to kill me. We tried to create multicultural, multi-generational events for people to come together. That's part of our model. We're interested in building social infrastructure. And so this placemaking, these events that bring people from different age groups, different nationalities together to convene, to talk about ideas, to be together.
Well, it's not just the formal part. The beauty of that session, for example, we went to with Wilkerson and others, is a lot of people stuck around and talked afterwards in settings that in gatherings we probably wouldn't have had before. But you have yet another thing coming up on November 7th. What is that and where is that and what are the details?
Yeah, it is the E250 Art and Culture Summit. And so we are on the eve of celebrating our country's 250th anniversary. And so we've held this summit for the last 2 years, and it's 2 days after Election Day. And so at that point, we might not know who is our president. And so we want to illuminate the power of art and culture in democracy today. And so we gather our city's most important art and culture leaders and other folks who are interested in democracy and art. We're gathering this year at Mass Art, and Mary Grant, who's one of the great presidents in the city, is hosting us there. And so we're excited to talk about democracy and art.
How do people find out about this, attend, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, they can go to our website, embraceboston.org, and type in Art and Culture Summit, and they'll find it. The cost of attendance is free $99, and so it's free to attend. And they should join us. They should be there. It's a half-day session.
Do you get stressed? I mean, I know you're praising your staff, which you do. We only have a few seconds left. Don't events stress you out? Because they stress me out.
They do stress me out because, you're trying to appease a lot of people. And the last time I was on with Dr. Kendi, we were stressed that day, right? Ms. Wilkerson needed security. Kendi needed security. And so
I should have mentioned he was on that panel. It was fabulous too. I'm sorry to mention.
We have to provide security for folks, and we try to not have it be overbearing in a way that makes people not feel comfortable. And so that's a part of it. And I think in this day and age where we're talking about racial equity, particularly those who are on the front lines of this work, it's dangerous. And so I worry about that the most. I worry about who's going to show up, not because they're interested, or I'm not worried about chairs not being in the right place, the lights, and I'm here sweating. I worry about those other things that happen and that might occur.
Well, the content, everything I've ever gone to that Embrace Boston had anything to do with was spectacular. So congratulations.
You got to keep. I mean, Jose's reaction to that celebration of him was just amazing. I mean, he was for a guy who's so well known, who's been such an activist, who's had that show on BUR for 50 years, he was so genuinely touched and happy to be there. It really was amazing.
We're hoping it's an annual event. And
that would be great. The turnout was fantastic. By the way, the turnout was amazing.
We had 5,000 people come out that day. So we were, it surprised our team with the type of outreach and the type of people that came out to hear good music and to show love to.
Before you go, I just want to say quickly that it's November 7th. You said we may not know who the president is. Let me apologize for Marjorie in advance. She'll be hospitalized on the 7th if there's not a president by then. So she will not be able to attend, but I will.
Think about the last few years. We probably will not know.
Right.
And even if there is a semblance of who might be the winner, I don't think one candidate will concede the election. And so we might still be counting.
Well, if that candidate loses, the press should stop covering that candidate, is my position.
Well, wouldn't that be a fun thing?
Imari, good luck on the 7th of November.
Thank you,
it's great
Imari.
to see you. We'll see you again soon. Imari Parrish-Jeffries.
We've been speaking with Imari Parrish-Jeffries, who's the president and CEO of Embrace Boston. He joins us monthly. Coming up next, we wait in fervent anticipation every year for Fat Bear Week. And it's finally here, after a momentary delay when one Fat Bear candidate was caught on video attacking and murdering another Fat Bear candidate on the live stream. We'll get your thoughts on the Hunger Games-style competition of the bears of Katmai National Park. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, composer and musician Reynalys Herrera. She gives new meaning to the phrase march to the beat of your own drum because her drum is a bicycle. A classically trained percussionist, she realized that the bike and all of its parts make for an incredibly versatile percussive instrument. Plus, an exhibition that looks at interior design by way of the bachelor pad, from the Gilded Age to the Jazz Age. That and more on the Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Revision Energy. Sunbug Solar is now part of Revision Energy, a solar installer committed to being a renewable energy partner for New England and working to fight climate change. Learn more at sunbugsolar.com. And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.org. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Kerbala, and for Marjorie. All day we've been soliciting your texts about Fat Bear Week. Imari and Juliette don't even know what it is. It's a reality TV-style competition that pits brown bears in Katmai National Park in Alaska against each other based on fatness. It's the 10th year of the tournament, which allows viewers to vote on their favorite oversized bear. But the low-stakes nature of all, of course, in 2024, had to take a grisly turn, thank you very much, with the announcement that the contest, thank you, had to be delayed when one bear attacked and killed another. This is actually sad. Live on the web stream for everybody to see. Here's Mike Fitz, naturalist and former park ranger, widely credited with creating Fat Bear Week, discussing the female bear that was killed.
And as we celebrate the Bears and their successes in 2024, we want to acknowledge that there's a death of a beloved Brooks River bear yesterday, number 402. She was killed yesterday by an adult male in an apparent predatory attack. Many people, including Sarah, Naomi, and I, care deeply about 402.
So do we. We should cancel the whole damn thing. What do you think, and what are the texters saying? No, really, it's too depressing.
At first, I thought it was, a competition thing, and so that's why I was saying competition brings out the worst in every living thing. That's why I hate reality shows. But it turns out he killed her for food.
He did?
Yeah, it was a male bear killed a female bear for food. He then dragged her body ashore and then hid it away so that he could eat it later. That's very rare. That's very, very rare. When it happens, it's always a male, but it's very, very rare.
What are the texters saying?
Texters are saying, an anonymous texter says, the question really is, did the Supreme Court grant Bear 469 immunity? That's what this texter wants to know.
Thank you very much.
Another anonymous texter says that he or she is getting ready to storm the Capitol in Juneau, Alaska, if Bear 469 doesn't win.
Two good Trump jokes.
And J.M. Brighton says, the violence and aggression of bears to each other, this is going to be a third one, the violence and aggression of bears to each other in the interest of finding more food to fatten themselves tells the story of today's Republican Party. So there were 3 Republican GOP jokes in a row.
Well, here's to end it, a non-GOP joke from Paul from Worcester. If one fat bear ate another fat bear, I'm pretty sure the bear who ate the other bear would win the competition. It would also have doubled in weight, and the judges definitely didn't want to further piss that bear off by not declaring it a winner. I mean, that is a fairly non-Trumpian analysis of something we never should have talked about to begin with. That's it.
That's
Fat
it.
Bear Week.
Thank you for all your texts coming up after the 1 o'clock news.
I'm doing that again.
Michael Curry from the NAACP and that was not my idea. And the Massachusetts Legal Community Health Center.
It wasn't my idea either, so why we do it?
You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
A virtual paint night with certified Bob Ross instructor Nicholas Hankins. Sign up by October 7th and we'll send you a kit before the paint night on October 29th. Reserve your spot now at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Conjuring the Spirit World, Art, Magic, and Mediums, on view this fall. For tickets and more information, you can visit pem.org/spiritworld. And S&H Construction, committed to using craftsmanship and technical experience to build spaces that work, and professional management to guide you through the process. shconstruction.com.
I'm Judy Ewell, Weekend Edition anchor, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 3 of Boston Public Radio. It's Michael Curry from the Mass League of Community Health Centers and the NAACP. He's currently co-chairing a task force looking into the closure of Dorchester's Kearney Hospital following the collapse of Stewart Healthcare, and specifically how to fill the need for Kearney's patients. And we'll talk about something that Michael knows more about than virtually anybody, lingering healthcare inequity.
I'm Andrea Cabral, in for Marjorie Egan. After that, we'll close out with you. With less than 5 weeks until Election Day, how are you navigating the relationships in your lives, romantic and otherwise, when opposing politics come up and inevitable family gatherings are scheduled? Call or text at 877-301-8970. Do you avoid talking about it with loved ones at all costs? Have you lost friendships, family members to Fox News or MSNBC rabbit holes? It's all next on hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden says up to 1,000 active duty soldiers will help the North Carolina National Guard deliver food, water, and medicine to communities isolated because of damage from Hurricane Helene. In a statement today, Biden says the troops have the manpower and logistical capabilities to speed up delivery of life-saving supplies. Hundreds of National Guard members have already been deployed to the communities struggling in the aftermath of Helene. The storm has been linked to more than 160 deaths in 6 states. President Biden will get a look at some of the damage today when he travels to the Carolinas. NPR's Franco Ordonez has more.
The storm, which made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, tore through the southeastern U.S., causing widespread damage from Florida to as far north as Virginia. President Biden will take an aerial tour of damaged areas in western North Carolina, as well as receive a briefing and meet with first responders and local officials. Vice President Harris, meanwhile, will tour damaged areas in Georgia, as well as get an on-the-ground briefing. The Democratic presidential nominee will also give an update on federal actions being taken to support recovery efforts. On Monday, former president and Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump traveled to Valdosta, Georgia, where he received a briefing on hurricane damage. Franco Ordonez, NPR News.
Vice President Harris is challenging former President Trump to join her for another presidential debate later this month. Her campaign issued a statement right after last night's vice presidential debate to say Harris will be in Atlanta on October 23rd. But Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform that he's not looking to do it again. Polls indicate the presidential race between Trump and Harris remains close. Thousands of dock workers at U.S. ports remain off the job for a second straight day. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports thousands of longshoremen voted to strike over a long-standing dispute over wages, job security, and benefits.
Mark Sandy, the chief economist at Moody's Analytics, says the strike could lead to shortages and price increases if it continues for more than a couple of weeks.
A lot of food items will be impacted. The vehicle industry will be impacted. You know, Walmart, obviously the largest retailer in the country, is the biggest importer through all these ports, and that'll be disrupted. But it'll take some time before the disruptions really become significant.
Economists say even though inflation has come down over the last year, the cost of living is still much higher than it was before the pandemic. The strike comes just weeks before the November election and the busy holiday shopping season. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 38 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Train service on the entire Green Line extension is now shut down until further notice, while MBTA crews and federal investigators determine the cause and the damage from a train derailment yesterday afternoon. Shuttle buses are running between North Station and Union Square or Medford Tufts, both endpoints, on the 2 branches until the end of the National Transportation Board's investigation. Subsequent repairs are completed. MBTA General Manager Phil Eng apologized for the disruption, calling it unacceptable. And officials said that the first car of a Green Line train derailed just after 4:45 yesterday afternoon outside of Lechmere Station. It blocked tracks to both branches. 6 riders were hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. About 50 passengers were evacuated to an emergency egress, but train service on the entire Green Line extension shut down until further notice. And then there were four Massachusetts lawmakers who say it's time for the MCAS to go away. Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ayanna Pressley attended a Massachusetts Teachers Association meeting last night to announce that their endorsements of ballot question 2 that would end the MCAS test as a high school graduation requirement. Warren says the test can be a helpful way to measure student growth, but one high-stakes test should not be the be-all and end-all. The others are the other politicians who are in favor of yes on 2 are Jim McGovern and Lori Trahan. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card Venture X. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Details at CapitalOne.com. And the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation at macfound.org.
Welcome to the third hour of Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. Andrea Cabral is sitting in for Marjorie Egan, who'll return tomorrow. Hello again, Andrea.
Hello, Jim.
So we're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu will join us at the library on Tuesday of next week for Ask the Mayor from 12 to 1. We're joined now, though, on Zoom by Michael Curry. Michael is the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. Michael, it's good to see you as always. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be back with you.
Hi, Mike. So you're our last guest of today's show. What did you think of the debate?
Interesting. I thought that it was a more substantive debate. I think we've been so used to Donald Trump level of debate where there's no substance. It's all bluster and self-aggrandizement that it was interesting to actually see a debate about policy, right? We've gotten away from that, arguably, in these presidential debates. So I thought it was a substantive conversation. It is disturbing. And of course, the highlight out of that debate is not recognizing that Trump did lose the election 4 years ago, and that JD still is holding the MAGA line that he did not lose. So I think, it's still disturbing. I thought ultimately it was one of the most substantive vice presidential debates that I've ever seen.
So you don't have you're not going to disagree with him, Jim? You're not
Michael, I wasn't going to say it again because I'm embarrassing myself. Substance be damned is my view. Is in the abstract, I agree, but it's not like it's not a race. They're not running against each other for an office. They're part of a team that is led by somebody else who are the people who are voting for and against. And I just think, Vance politely did the same crap that Trump does. I just worry that Walz, until the end, and on abortion, Walz let him get away with it, which really put me over the edge. Having said that, Steward Healthcare, which we discuss with you every single time you are here.
Won't it be nice when there'll come a day when we won't? You'll be on the show and we won't discuss Trump or Steward Healthcare.
So we can't wait for that day.
I think we know that there are some of the 6 of the hospitals, I guess, were purchased. 2 of them were not. One of them in Boston, Kearny, and obviously there's Neshoba. You were picked to be co-chair of a group that is going to look into how to fill the hole that was created by the disappearance of Kearny. Could you flesh that out for us, what your mission is, what you're going to do, what are the issues you're trying to address, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so a few things. So one is I feel fortunate, thankful, not like I needed another black job, but I have one.
Jesus.
That I've been, tagged a few times over my career to sort of serve in these sort of short-term task forces, working groups. I did serve on Deval Patrick's task force when he became governor. I was representing Blue Cross at the time, looking at what he should be thinking around healthcare. I did work on Mayor Walsh's transition team. Andrea Campbell, Attorney General, and then Governor Healy and Driscoll-elect, their transition team. So I think these processes work where you get really smart people together, community together, hearings, community input, and you start to have a vision and get vision around what can happen going forward. So I actually think that this process is a positive one. So basically, I'll be co-chairing the Kearny Hospital Task Force with Dr. Dekutu. I believe by end of day today, we will have finalized the list of the members for that working group /task force. The governor announced both a task force at Kearney Hospital to address that issue in Neshoba Valley. And that work will start post haste to start to look at the issue. So when you ask the question, Jim, what are we looking at? We're looking at what's lost in terms of access by those communities who relied on Kearney Hospital. So the psychiatric services, inpatient, outpatient, the urgent care, emergency services that were being provided, the specialty care that was being provided out of that building. We'll look at the fact that people are now destabilized. Where are they going, and where are they now forced to get care at because they can't get it closer to home or at the place that they've been used to? We'll start to have conversations around some of the elephants in the room, I'll call it, right? What happens with that building in terms of acquisition of that building going forward, because it's not owned by the state, right? It's still owned by entities outside of the state. In addition to that, the disrepair of the building, right? It is a building that is not in the best condition. And Andrea Campbell and I have had these conversations about the need to maintain quality access to healthcare in our communities. So, we'll have those conversations and start to explore what's possible. Is a medical village, it's maybe some disease-specific treatment and care out of those buildings. How do we maintain psychiatric services in a community that would be absent those services, but for Kearney Hospital? So many things for us to take up: data, analysis, input from community, and then we'll deliver recommendations to the governor and the mayor within the next 3 or 4 months.
Okay, Mike, this is going to be a long one. In the meantime, your community health centers and nearby hospitals are seeing an influx of the patients from, Kearney and Neshoba, not just an increase in volume, but also an increase, it seems, at least anecdotally to this point, of sickness. The population that's presenting itself to other facilities for care is sicker. Lots of folks know who Bill Walczak is. He lives in Dorchester. He's the former CEO of the Codman Square Health Center. He was the president of Kearney Hospital when it was owned by Stewart for 14 months between 2011 and 2012. He's written 2 pieces for the Dorchester Reporter where he's pretty critical of the entire process, but he makes the point that we wouldn't be, first he makes the point about repurposing these hospitals into sort of urgent care facilities and continuing to use them for care. But he also talks about the fact that Stewart was allowed to sort of let go of them in 30 days versus the 90 days, which the point he makes is that would have been the planning time for transition to know the very things that you're suggesting this group is going to be looking at. So was that time lost where they could have held Stewart's feet to the fire and had that time to do the planning you're having to do now while new patients are going to other facilities?
Yeah, so one is we knew and we know we did not have the regulatory oversight that was needed, right? That we didn't have the laws that we needed to really hold Stewart accountable in the ways that we should have. And I think the legislature is taking this up and thinking about this as we speak, right? They're thinking about how do we hold not only Stewart, but any other systems that come into the Commonwealth accountable for complying with DPH regulations around closure and notification, transparency, finances, and so forth. So one is I'm going to wait for our legislature and the governor to really work out the details of that for the next situation, right? For this situation, you are absolutely correct. We have a crisis in that now those folks who would have gone to Kearney Hospital and who may still show up at the front doors of Kearney and see a sign, maybe, and then now realize they got to rush somewhere else to get emergency services, will realize that their access to care is diminished within their community. And some of them are unfortunately showing up at community health centers where if you're in an emergency crisis, you need to be in an emergency room. And that is not Dorchester House or Codman Square. If you need urgent care services, of course, if it's appropriate, then we want you at a community health center since Kearney is closed. And Dot House and Codman Square are the 2 closest in proximity, but there are others throughout Boston, 22 health centers just in the city of Boston. If the care is appropriate, we want you there. But the problem to your question is we've not been resourced in a way to absorb, to respond to that growing need. So you have Dr. Guy Fish at Common Square, just relatively new in his role. Common Square, phenomenal leader, doctor, who reported recently 70 to 75 is what they weekday, on an average weekday is what they see in patients coming over from the Kearney site. That's up to 100, right, on a weekday basis. So the reality is, how does he respond to that without the core of providers that he needs, without the resources and the front desk staff and the services that are needed to respond to their needs? Now, this is on top of the migrant crisis, which we're already responding to, on top of what we were experiencing with deferred care, people coming back to care. Now on top of all that crisis, right, we now add another crisis of a closure. So you are absolutely right. The impacts on this is, as Malika Mims, the head of the Greater Boston Association of Black Social Workers, said, it's the trickle-down effect of this closure.
You know, Michael Curry, you are far more, I don't know what the adjective is, understanding about the legislature. I don't mean that critically. You work with them. You've been very successful working with them, I have to say. When I read Ron Mariano, the speaker, saying that they didn't get to finish their work on improving the oversight of hospitals, systems like Steward, because he wanted to get it right, my reaction, and I want to know if you think this is unfair, was, well, if you didn't want to rush to get it right, maybe you shouldn't have rushed. And maybe you should have stayed in session, because it's pretty important stuff. And instead, maybe you would know better than I, they're actually working on it, but it seems to me fairly unlikely it could pass unanimously, which is what has to happen for it to become law during this informal session. Are you troubled that the legislature, I think, punted on this critical issue?
You know, it's interesting. I think one, as any of us who've been in and around government relations for a long time, and I've been doing this since my early 20s, and I'm 56 now, is, you know, oftentimes the clock runs out. And, you know, you get 5 of us in a room to agree on anything, we probably will run past the clock, because many of us will have ideological differences and have differences of opinion. But again, to your point, Jim, the urgency of the moment, right? It demands that we find a way to reach a compromise. Now, I say that to say this, that I think the Steward crisis is what it is at this point. We already have the transfer of some of those sites. We have the closure of 2. Steward is now officially gone from the state. It's really a future conversation around who comes into Massachusetts and what oversight will exist for those entities that may want to enter Massachusetts. So I do think there's time for them to resolve this matter, because it's not going to impact Steward at this point. Now, that's where Markey and others are trying to hold Ralph and Steward accountable, and Bernie Sanders hold them accountable still for what they did do in Massachusetts and arguably in other parts of the country. So here's what I would say to you, Jim, as an activist who's been doing the activism part for so many years. Thank God for people who are impatient and irritated like you, who hold everybody accountable, right? You should question why we didn't do something, or why government didn't do something, why they didn't do it on time, because quite frankly, they listen. And they typically try to respond to what is their constituents' frustration with getting something done.
Yeah, let me just say one last thing. You say there is time. Let me broach something quickly where I think there's not enough time. The Senate, the United States Senate, a rare act of unanimity, voted to hold Dilatory in contempt for refusing to appear before the Senate committee. It's only been a few days, so this may be unfair. Merrick Garland, in my opinion, has been a total disappointment as Attorney General. Primarily because it took him so long to do what he should have done on Trump, and as a result, Trump has been able to run out the clock. Since there's no dispute in this situation, as far as I know, and Andrea and Michael, you're a much better lawyer, both of you, than I am, about the fact that he failed to honor a subpoena, that there was a legitimate vote to hold him in contempt, should Merrick Garland not move with wild speed to prosecute this guy, so the message is sent, when you decide that personal enrichment to the nth degree is more important than the health of your patients, you're going to go to jail? I mean, don't we need and demand an immediate response from Garland? First you, Michael, and then I'm curious to hear what Andrea has to say.
Well, it's funny. My frustration is bigger than this Stewart issue and Ralph De La Torre. My issue with how quickly removed to hold people accountable in the Justice Department moves would go back to the January 6th insurrection hearings. And the reality is people were ignoring and snubbing their nose at Congress in appearing. So I'll be honest with you, Jim. I actually think that the accountability part of this is going after people who don't respect and appreciate our system of government, our judicial process, the power of our Congress is something that we really absolutely should demand. And Ralph should be held accountable for not showing up, as should many others, including the folks who tried to overthrow government and our democratic process on January 6th.
I absolutely agree with Mike. It's really kind of interesting that Steve Bannon is sitting in a federal prison right now, but he's the outlier
I forgot that.
on contempt. He's the one that they actually did prosecute. But I think Merrick Garland's, and he may be getting, advice and counsel from someplace else, but Merrick Garland's calculation here is there are subpoena scofflaws sitting in our chairs of some of the very committees that routinely drag people from the DOJ before them to answer questions. Jim Jordan is easily in day 900 and something. Eric Swalwell keeps a running tab of every single day that he still hasn't responded to his subpoena. There are a bunch of them in Congress, and if he does it with Ralph De La Torre, if he does it with regular people, for lack of a better term, not that Ralph is really regular in terms of his wealth, why isn't he doing it?
Well, the House
members
hasn't
of
held him in
Congress?
contempt. I mean, that as opposed to De La Torre, 100-0 or whatever the unanimous vote was, he's been held in contempt. The House is obviously not going to, Republican House is not going to hold the chair of the Judiciary Committee in contempt, even though he should be held in contempt.
Right.
So, in the words of Bill Belichick, who I never quote, do your damn job, Merrick Garland.
I'm not disagreeing with you that he should be doing it.
In any case, and by the way, if you haven't read the Spotlight work, it all started, Brian McGrory did these beautiful columns about the jet planes and the yachts and the whatever. Then the Spotlight team essentially went down a list of people who are dead because Stewart Healthcare's leadership didn't give a damn about them, but only cared about self-enrichment.
Well, what you can hope
Read
is
it.
that perhaps he's working on an indictment.
Well, I hope it's true.
It's possible.
We rarely broach the exact same topic other than a debate with two guests right in a row, but you're in this piece by Shirley Leung that really had a huge impact on me. This piece that Shirley did last week about 10 CEOs of color in this city who have left. That was part one. And part two, in the vast majority of cases, they have not been followed up in that job by a person of color. And you're quoted in that piece by Shirley about what to do. And I'd like to hear what that was for those who didn't read it. And more broadly, your reaction to that following a week after Shirley's piece about black leaders at Harvard disappearing and being replaced by people who are not of color at Harvard University. What's your reaction to all that there, Michael Curry?
So as I've said, both in that article and I've said across the country when this has come up, which is we do things differently in Massachusetts, right? In some ways, that's a badge of honor that we do things differently in Massachusetts. In other ways, it's a criticism. We don't ban books in Massachusetts, and we don't do outright overt anti-DEI effort in Massachusetts. What we do here is we quietly let people disappear. We defund programs and initiatives. And in progressive liberal Massachusetts, that's what we do when we don't want to support, and we weren't really committed to what we said we were after the murder of George Floyd. So what that looks like is if I showed you a picture of the Health Equity Compact, which you and I have talked about before, those 85 leaders of color who are leading a charge to advance health equity in Massachusetts, and I put an X through some of them that are gone now from their roles, you might be shocked at how many have been left their positions in just 3 years. So the reality is, I think one of the efforts that I think we need to put forth is a conversation on the why. And of course, some people move because a job doesn't work out. Sometimes they move because there's just a disagreement between them and their organization. But as I said in the article, Race Ipsa Loquitur, the thing speaks for itself, they're leaving for a reason, right? They're not getting the runway that white men get to turn things around. They're not getting the support of their boards, and in some cases, even their staff, the deference, the grace that other people are afforded. they're not really supported by their organizations. And I think what I'm concerned about, and I think the thing we need to do going forward is oftentimes, and both of you know this, they can't come out and say it, right? So if you want another CEO job, if you want another ED job, you really can't be too critical of your past employer, but I'm gonna tell that. And I'm gonna talk about the fact that this is an unequal society where Black and brown folks get run out of positions and we all pay the price for it. And whether that's you didn't pay us enough, you didn't empower us enough, you undermined us. The reality is we got to address that because it diminishes what we said we were about in the wake of George Floyd.
Can I ask? Oh, you ask. I have a follow-up. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is I think these two things then are connected. So there is this exodus of CEOs, and we said with our previous guest, Imari, that before Harvard failed to defend Khalil
Jabbar
yes.
Muhammad, yeah.
They failed to defend Claudine Gay. Now Harvard comes out, there's a survey that's been done where they surveyed about 600, they had listening sessions with over 600 educators, students, administrators, and alumni association reps, and then did a survey of thousands of students, faculty, and instructors, only to find out that close to half of the Harvard professors and students surveyed for this particular report are afraid to express their views on campus. They cite a fear of criticism on social media, damage to their reputations, risk of discrimination, and harassment complaints. The reason why I say the two things are sort of connected is because it comes from the top. They're all watching the way leaders in institutions around the state are being treated, whether or not people are coming to their defense, whether or not they're gone before anybody even knows that there was an issue or a problem.
Exactly.
So, I would also like you to comment. I think, Jim might have another question about the CEOs, but in the context of all of this, can you comment on this Harvard survey and what that really says about the state of higher education and the intimidation or the chilling effect that our current behavior is having on the people who are supposed to be leading this country in a couple of years?
So the way people look to Massachusetts, right, and they look to Massachusetts across the country for many things, the way they look to us, they look to Harvard, right, other academic institutions. So when Harvard had their Harvard Legacy of Slavery, right, we knew the implications of that analysis, that recognition, that public recognition that Harvard was complicit in their leadership with slavery. And that they put up some money to actually look at that, to have some recognition of that history. But the reality is power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Frederick Douglass. And the reality is people get uncomfortable. They take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. So what we can't let Harvard do is that initial proclamation, that initial awareness that they needed change at Harvard. I've been a guest speaker for the students at the Blacktivism conference they used to hold at Harvard, and we'd have these kind of conversations among students. I engage Harvard professors on a regular basis about what's happening and what they need from us in the community. To your point, we got to give them support, right? I wish Claudine Gay, and I'll say this publicly, I've not said this before, and I imagine Imari and others would echo this. I wish she had called us sooner. Right, to say, hey, community, I'm in trouble. And folks who didn't want me here are leading the charge to get rid of me. And I need you to show up for me. I guarantee you I would have been first among others in line to say, what do you need us to champion for you so that you can keep this job and we can make sure Harvard is progressing under a Black woman in this time, right? Right time, right place, right moment. And we didn't do that because we didn't know. And to your point, by the time we knew that it was really her job was in jeopardy, she was gone. So I'm concerned that there are other Black and brown folks in leadership positions that we are going to see quietly disappear, and all the progress they brought with them or could bring with them will also disappear.
So, two just factual updates. When the executive director of Harvard's Legacy of Slavery Initiative resigned, I think in the summer of this year, she was the third leader of that organization that had resigned in a very short period of time. And number two, if people don't know, Claudine Gay, after leaving, has been replaced on an interim basis, at least for the next few years, by a white man. Last question for you.
And just to that, I was invited by Harvard to serve on that Harvard Legacy of Slavery Advisory Group with that team. So I'm talked to them and been in the work with them to determine sort of what happens with this effort. Deeply disappointed that they lost talent, and now the future of that work is in jeopardy.
Before you go, getting back to it really relates to the Harvard thing too, but we just said about these executives not getting the support, not getting enough leeway to do their jobs. So a black executive calls you on the phone and says, I've been offered one of those jobs in Boston, but I've been offered a comparable job, let's say in my hometown of Philadelphia. What advice do you give that executive in waiting?
So I laugh because I get that call all the time.
I bet you do.
And what's funny is I say to people, right, if you do your Letterman top 10 list of whether they really want you to come, that top 10 list will be a pretty easy one to make that decision. Are you reporting, in this case, what power is your board giving you? How much autonomy and leadership, how much of a runway are they giving you to turn it around, to rebuild it? Do they really want you? I can speak to the stuff like culture and whether you'll be received well in Boston. Folks like us will make sure you're received. We'll host receptions, we'll introduce you around. But the real test for you, the person calling me, is whether the organization is trying to invite you in really wants you. And I can give you a top 10 list, and then you can make that decision for yourself. And I will tell you, Jim, some of them call me back and say, I'm glad you gave it to me, and I'm not coming to Boston because they really didn't want me. And I get that call more and more frequently in the last, say, 5 years.
That's a horrible state of affairs.
I just want to clarify before we go, the study that I was talking about surveyed all students from across all backgrounds. We sort of narrowed the discussion to black and brown students in the context of the discussion, but I want people to be clear. This survey, these feelings where over 50% feel intimidated or feel as though they can't express themselves, these are across the board, students, faculty, instructors, and they're from all different backgrounds at Harvard.
Michael, good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you.
Always good to see you both.
Take care.
We've been speaking with Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers and a board member of the National NAACP. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to open the phone lines to hear your thoughts on whether the political discourse has caused rifts in your personal relationships. Last night's debate was more civil than we've been used to. Does civility matter anymore? How do you navigate politics in everyday life with less than 5 weeks until the election? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
In battleground states this year, Democrats and Republicans aren't only trying to win, they're also trying to lose by less in the counties where their opponents are strongest.
If we get more than 35%, that is a win, because the rest of the state will help carry us over the finish line.
I'm Ari Shapiro. What this strategy looks like in Wisconsin on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Commonwealth's flagship public university. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Andrew Cabral sitting in for Marjorie, who's back tomorrow. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Mayor Wu is here on Tuesday of next week from noon to 1. We started the show asking you your opinion, what you thought about last night's debate, and a lot of you didn't get your turn, and so if you're dying to talk about that, that's okay. But we were going to close the show by asking you about politics and your close relationships. I don't know how to describe the pod person who pretended to be J.D. Vance last night highlighted a problem that many Americans have as our nation gets even more divided.
It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics.
Okay, the problem, of course, is that he and his running mate have consistently turned up the rhetoric using dehumanizing and polarizing language to rile up their base, not even to mention the literal life-threatening policies Trump boasts about when it comes to reproductive rights, bodily autonomy, all that sort of stuff. But the problem exists. It's hard to talk about politics at all, and it's even harder to talk about the issues with a loved one or a great friend who just doesn't see things the same way as you do. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. Do you have a no-tolerance rule in your house, meaning we just don't talk about it? Have you lost friendships or relationships or lovers or partners over an inability to find common ground? We're less than 5 weeks away from the election. The holidays are around the corner. Thank goodness Thanksgiving is after November 5th. But how are you navigating all this in your personal world when there are people who feel as strongly about the other guy as you feel about the other person? 877-301-8970. I don't know if I ever told you this story. When in 2016 was the first time Marjorie and I ever did a segment like this, about this. And I'll never forget a woman who was a regular caller to the show about politics almost always. Every time she called, she worked her fiance into the conversation. Didn't matter what. I was talking to my fiance last night. I felt like saying, I don't care what your fiance. He didn't call me. What? And she'd always work him in. This day, she didn't mention her fiance. And so I said jokingly, hey, your fiance is going to be mad. You didn't even mention him today. You know what she said to me? He's no longer my fiance. And I said, I probably shouldn't ask, but can I? Why? The answer is he was a Trump person. She was a Clinton person, and they just couldn't coexist. And I have to say, I can understand. It shouldn't be that way, right. But I understand on something that runs as deep as that, why the problems are that. Do you have friends or anybody who's in Trump world?
It's really kind of interesting and maybe not surprising, but no one that I know, that I am friends with, that I care about, is a Trump person. They're just not. And it's not about race or anything. It's like I have black friends, I have white friends, all kinds of different people from all different kinds of backgrounds. None of them are. I am certainly, it's pretty clear, not the person that, you want to start talking about, your love of Trump with, and I think most people know that, so I don't even get approached by people who feel that way. I think I know of one person who I became aware was sort of a Trump fan, but I hadn't been in touch with this person for, many years, so it was easy to just kind of keep it that way and not do any outreach or anything like that, and just let them go their own way. But that is not an issue that I have to deal with.
We want to know if you have, and apparently a lot of you have. Before we get to your calls and texts, are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan? Do you watch?
Yes.
Early on, there was an episode. I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but the gist of it is right. The deal that Larry David makes when he marries RFK's wife, who isn't RFK's wife,
Cheryl Hines,
is there was something like in 5 years, if we stay married or whatever, I, Larry David, go out for one night and I can do anything I want.
Hall pass.
With a hall pass kind of thing. So she doesn't like it, but she agreed to it. So Larry David goes out. He finds this woman who I think is an actor. And he is totally smitten. All he's thinking about is having sex with this woman. It's okay, because even though his wife isn't happy, Cheryl Hines, even though she isn't happy about it, she made a deal, etc. So he's about to consummate, literally and figuratively, this relationship. And the actress invites him into her dressing room while she is changing. And the look on his face is like the happiest man on the planet. He's going to have sex with this woman. His wife knows, and she's going to live with it, etc. And he's literally sprawled on her couch. She's talking to him. I'm changing my lingerie now. I'll be out in a minute. And all of a sudden, Larry leans on the back of the couch and sees on her dressing table, she has a picture of George W. Bush. And he immediately runs out of the dressing room and runs home, which I thought was such a perfect example of what we're talking about today. Even if your goal is within reach, I think you know what I mean.
All right, so this is really low-hanging fruit, and I'm a little bit ashamed of myself.
Well, this is low, too.
For the fact that I'm going to say it, but I'm thinking to myself, how actors draw upon their life experience to infuse reality into their roles, and I'm thinking, with RFK, being married to RFK, and particularly his latest dalliance with Olivia Nuzzi, Cheryl Hines was well prepared to let him go for his hall pass because she
That's
does
a
it with
very
RFK.
fine point.
I think, it was kind of a low blow, but I felt like doing
Low's
it.
fine. Let's go to, what was Michelle Obama? When they go low, we go lower. I think that's what she said.
I go lower.
Exactly. Let's go to Jay and Peabody. You're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the
Hi,
show.
Jay.
Hi.
Hi, I think Michelle said when they go low, we go high.
I was joking, Jay, but thank you. I was joking. It didn't come across. It's okay. It's my fault. Go ahead, Jay.
No. What I was going to say is that I recently had a sexual encounter, and I got turned off because I found out that she was a Trump voter.
Well,
and when I say,
you made sure you didn't find out till after, though, huh, Jay? Okay. Okay, I think we got to move on. But thank you for sharing that with us, I guess.
But
thank you.
This is very real for people. So
Okay.
Eleanor, who from Cranston, Rhode Island, said,
Cranston is what it is.
Cranston,
but yes,
Rhode Island, where my sister lives. I'm married to a smart, honest guy, but who is a Trumper. He's the only one in my whole family. We try not to talk about it, but I get so frustrated. I just don't understand. I'm not looking forward to the next 4 years if he wins. It was a strain on our marriage, and it still is.
That's horrible. I mean, that's really horrible.
Well, the other thing you don't see is really, I'm waiting to hear from somebody who says that they can't stand the fact that they're married to somebody who supports Joe Biden or who is a Democrat. But yeah, I mean, this is a very real struggle for people.
Let's go to Phil and Danvers. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, I'm glad to thank you for taking me.
Sure.
When I'm having trouble talking to people who have completely different, just mic drop understanding of things that are so different than me, I always start with the comment that we're not each other's enemies. Ignorance is the enemy. And, we don't agree on which one of us is ignorant or which sources of data can be reliable. But we can usually agree that a lot of people are being misled, they're being lied to, they just don't understand it. If they only knew the truth, they would change their tunes. And if we start from there, then we can take a single issue where we disagree and say, well, let's you and I just sit down on this issue, and let's try and track back to what did people really do and what did people really say, and you can show me where I'm wrong, or I can show you.
You ever done that? You ever done that?
Work.
Did you ever?
Yeah, say it doesn't always work, but and it doesn't change people's minds. Facts by themselves are not going to change people's minds. But my hope is that if I can get people to think about what their sources are, and if a source is unreliable, maybe they stop listening to that source so much and look for
Phil,
something better.
I have to say I totally wish what you're saying was true. I find it hard in this polarized environment, but go for Anand Giridhara's book, The Persuaders. What's the name of that book? He's a really sophisticated thinker.
He is.
With us regularly. He actually tells stories about exactly what you're describing, which I would not believe were true did I not know him. So maybe you're right. Phil, thank you for the call. Jim in Boston, I'm an African-American male, and I have colleagues that are open about voting for Trump. I also have a manager who supports Trump. It's a really hard place to be when most of the people I work with support him. I've already started to apply to another company. That's a relationship ends, and a job is about to end because people just can't deal with it. It's pretty horrible.
It is. Let's see what Jerry, who's in the car, has to say. Hopefully he can add a little something to the discussion.
Hi, Jerry.
Well, hello. First-time caller and lover of your show.
Thank you for both.
I have to say, first off, going back to an earlier comment, I as well don't really have any local friends that are anything other than pro-Kamala.
Yeah.
But I do have to tell you a story about my brother, who happens to live in Georgia, and his last comment to me, where I sort of ended my basic communication with him, was, there's no socialistic country that's ever survived in the world, yet there's been many dictatorships that are survived. And after that comment and a few other accompanying comments with me being aghast with his comments, I have not spoken to him for about a year or two.
How does that feel to you?
Well, it feels bad with a family member, but I feel great about the simple fact that I'm sticking to my values from the standpoint of how I feel about people and how I feel about what's going on around me. His comments where you just don't get it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going like, no, I really don't think you get it. And that sort of ended it. I feel badly in that regard, but I'm thankful for sticking to my gut, I guess.
You're a hell of a person, Jerry. That was a great first call. We hope you make a second one soon.
Well,
Thank
mixed
you.
up in all of this, too, is that people, I guess probably on both sides, feel betrayed. It's sort of, but I thought I knew you.
Yeah,
How could I
that's exactly
possibly
right.
have thought that I knew you when you're willing to say that you think this person is somebody that should lead this country? So there's all of that.
By the way, this doesn't have to be a one-way street. If you're somebody who's a Trump supporter who is broken off a relationship or is having a really hard time with because someone you care about deeply is supporting Harris, we'd love to talk to you, too.
Let's go to Maria in Boston. Hi, Maria.
Hello, Maria.
Hi. I just want to say I have a handful of friends, I believe, a couple of friends who may be conservative, and we don't really go there. We've skirted around, and I realized, we have a different perspective. And I don't want to lose them. But anybody coming into my life who's a new friend, potential friend, if I find out that they're a Trumpster or really conservative, we just have a different value system. I just don't see it going to the next level. I'm nice to everybody, but inviting them into my world as a deep friend, I just don't see it. I'm not, different value system.
That's an interesting dividing line. Old
Right.
friends and not new ones.
Because you have history with them,
Yeah.
and you can find something to sort of balance it out.
Yeah.
But you remember the show
Maria, thanks.
with Michael J. Fox, Family Ties? The entire premise was that the parents were former hippies, and Michael J. Fox
Right.
was this conservative, and it was played for laughs. But it was presented as you can live with this.
Before
you
we
don't
take a
have to disown your
break,
kid.
I assume everybody remember. We don't take a break? We're not taking a break? Oh, thank you. Before we don't take a break, which is really what I meant to say. What show is this? And do you remember, this is right around the time of the first Trump campaign in 2016. SNL did this brilliant routine, because everybody's screaming at each other as it was. And what the deal was in this family at Thanksgiving is if anybody makes a comment that crosses the line, and every comment crossed the line, then all of a sudden Adele starts playing in the back. Is it Hello?
The little girl, puts it on. She has a boombox
and
there
it starts
for
playing.
it.
So listen carefully to this discussion between two people at the Thanksgiving table, and then all of a sudden you'll hear Adele enter the scene. Here it is.
Why is it that your friends keep antagonizing the police? Why would you ask my boyfriend that? I'm just trying to get to know Jamal.
Jamal.
That's very constitutional.
Hello, it's me. I was wondering if after all these years you'd like to be.
Oh, your grandparents are here.
And by the way, I think they all stood up. Did they not all stand
Oh,
up?
yeah, and then they began to sing, and then they suddenly had fingernails, and they all had blonde hair. Yeah. Yeah.
877-301-8970.
One of our anonymous texters says that his or her closest sibling became obsessed with Trump and MAGA in 2016. She stopped talking to me when I told her my feelings toward all things Trump. Took us almost 3 years to start talking again because and that only happened apparently because our mother was dying, and we both agreed to avoid talking about politics. So it is incredible that something as tragic as losing a parent is what ultimately ends up bringing you together, but you still can't, talk about it. That's how damaging this has been.
Diego in Mission Hill, welcome to the show. Thank you for calling. Hi, Diego.
Hi. Listen, I have lifelong friends and I have relatives who are Trump supporters. 2016, I made a ton of money betting on Trump because everyone I knew said there's no way you could win. This time of year, I call all my friends and my relatives. I talk to them about other things, and I bring up politics. And because I don't argue with them or try and change their minds, they talk to me. and I listen. I get a lot of information. Occasionally I can probe deeper by saying, where did you hear that? You know, I've heard something different. And if we have civil war, if Trump gets elected, these are still going to be my friends. I hate the fact that people won't even listen to someone who is on the other side. That's one of the problems with our country. I live with somebody who won't even listen to any Republican that comes on the TV. They'll leave the room. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
You don't live with Andrea, do you, Diego? I don't.
Not you funny.
Diego.
No, not that I know of.
Thank you very much for
Check
the
the
call.
closet, Diego.
So an anonymous texter says, I'm relatively new to online dating, and you see a lot of times people will say no Trumper or no Democrats on their profile.
No, that is a common. I think that's a common feature. I mean, people have been saying no this or that for a long time. It just usually wasn't political.
Yeah.
That's the new feature.
Do you know who said the no Trumper thing? The most famous person, Melania, put that on her dating site. Did you know that? No. Thank you. It took her a while to realize whatever.
I don't know where you come up with these
I don't know
things.
where I came up with it either.
You want to talk to Matt in the car?
I'd love to talk to Matt in the car.
Hi, Matt in the car.
Hello, Matt in the car.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. You
Sure.
always do, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
Funny that you should bring up Thanksgiving because this is where this all started with me and my mother. Unfortunately, we've always had a rather contentious relationship. But the night the night before Thanksgiving, a couple weeks after Trump was elected, was the nastiest, most vicious argument that we've ever had. Because I just couldn't believe it. For starters, all my entire life leading up until this, all she ever said was Trump is a clown, Trump is a con artist, Trump is a criminal, all this. And she's going to vote for him a third time in November. Our relationship has just completely deteriorated since then. We can't talk about anything. I just can't believe that she spews Russian propaganda, and I can't believe the things that we usually only communicate through text now at this point, and I just can't believe some of the things that she says. Especially considering how she used to talk about this man. So it's unfortunate that, again, she's the only parent that I have alive. My father passed away not long after this argument, actually. And it's something that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life, knowing that I am never going to be able to have a relationship with this woman that I would when I was growing up. So that's my first one. My second one is more interesting. My stepmother.
That was pretty interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, how about this? My stepmother, her aunt is Barbara Mikulski, who is one of the longest if not the longest serving. I don't know if it's a kind
former senator from Maryland, legendary senator. Yeah.
Legendary, yeah. So she's my great aunt through marriage, and so my stepmother also has 2 sisters and a brother. All 4 of them staunch Trump supporters. That I have no relationship with. That I again grew up knowing these people and having relationships with them. So that's 5 people in my family that just completely, the relationship with them, 4 of them is just completely gone. I'll probably never speak to them ever again. And the only reason that my mother and I have to communicate with each other is to discuss what's going on with her mother, who is, up in age, and we have to, talk about caring for her. Other than that, there's nothing else that we have to discuss. We can't have a civilized discussion about anything. And by the way, I also forgot to mention, I don't go around telling people I'm gay, but I think in this case it's relevant to mention that because I don't understand how you can have a son who is gay or a child who is gay or trans or anything like that and continue to support this man election after election, essentially seeing the 4 years of what's happened while he was president and what he's been able to do since then while not being president. And I just can't wrap my head around it, and I never will be able to. I don't care how much therapy I go through. I don't think that's anything that's ever going to go away.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for the call. But,
Thank you, Matt.
But to Matt's point, that is the line that I draw. You cannot tell me that I should be listening to the perspective of someone who wants me dead, who doesn't think that I deserve to have the same rights that they do. Who couches, tries to whip up immigrant hatred or hatred toward immigrants by classifying the work that they do as black jobs that are being taken away from black. You can't. There's no way that I can have that discussion with you. But I do want to top Matt with just one thing in the couple of minutes we have left. We have an anonymous texter who says, "No discussion since 2016 with my husband. He is a black Trump supporter. His voting history is Clinton, Bush, Kerry, Obama, Romney, Trump. He's a dedicated husband in all other ways, so the marriage has survived. I blame his MBA. Well, I give you credit. The power of love is very, very strong. I'm saying this to the texter. But what I also have to say is, you think you're in the club until they come for you. You can vote for somebody like Trump because you have an MBA and you think he's going to make you money. That's not going to stop him or anybody else from coming from you. And that's the one lesson that I would say, if black people don't learn any other lesson, or people of color don't learn any other lesson, it's you're not in the club when you think you're in the club. It's just that you find out too late, and it really is too late for you. But I could never live with a guy who, there's just no way. There's just no way.
Apparently most of these people, with that one exception, can't either. Any case, is Jared with us, or is he? Jared,
he
you there?
I'm here.
Hey, Jared. Boy,
Is he getting
talk
some
about
lunch?
transition. So, what are you doing? By the way, do you know anybody who is on the other side of the Trump Harris axis in
Have
your
you
world?
lost any friendships?
I do know people on the other side, and I think. So we know that last week I spoke to Liz Cheney, and I actually asked her about this, especially with Thanksgiving coming up. And I saw her talk about this at the speaker series and had people listening, people in an audience filling Symphony Hall, very Democratic Boston audience. Not to say that everybody there was that way that night, but a lot of people were nodding and applauding with her, despite the fact that 4 years ago they certainly probably wouldn't have, based on her conservative values that might not align with their own. But I think when you have the opportunity to listen to someone articulate their thoughts, and you can have a discussion that changes things, and that's what she's imploring people to do, and that's what I try to do. I'm fairly guarded as a journalist anyway, but I think there has to be room for conversation, and that's how I operate.
Well, remember also, I hadn't thought of it until you just said that, the Kennedy siblings of RFK Jr., didn't cut off the relationship. They say they loved him, but they could not have condemned him more dramatically for his behavior vis-a-vis Trump. So, variation on theme. What are you doing at 2 o'clock there, Jared Bowen?
We lead off the show in a really exciting way with Renalise Herrera, who is a musician who is really rising up, getting awards, grants, all for playing unusual instruments. In this case, she's playing the bicycle. You would never know it unless she has walked you through what she's doing. It's just brilliant musicianship. We're also talking about Urinetown, the musical, with its director, Courtney O'Connor, and we'll look at The Importance of Being Furnished, which is a new exhibition and book all about 4 bachelors who furnished their homes and really were pioneers in interior design in the late 1800s. This is a time when you couldn't be gay, so they were very, very avant-garde in their own right.
What's
With
that called
a name
again?
like Urinetown, that play better be really good.
It is very, very good, Andrea. I'll even go again with you.
Hey, Jared, good luck. We'll be listening at 2 o'clock. We
Thanks,
appreciate
Jared.
it. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
To raise in 2 minutes. Can you chip in $100 right now? Call 888-995-9272. We've been doing great this hour, but we've got to bring this one home. $300 to go in 2 minutes. 888-995-9272 or classical.org.
And giving just takes a couple of minutes of your time. We just need your name and contact information, which we keep private. You can sign up as a sustaining member with a recurring monthly payment from your bank account or credit card, or you can make that a one-time gift. Either way, you're helping us reach our goal this hour. Call 888-995-9272 or make that gift online at classical.org.
A really quick phone call, $300 to raise and less than a minute to do it.
Support for WCRB comes from you and the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Conjuring the Spirit World, Art, Magic, and Mediums. This interactive exhibition unveils the secrets of seances and magic shows from the age of Harry Houdini, featuring a live